Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Please stand by. We are going on air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting, budget briefing. Thank you for joining as we go through our budget process. Thank you, Raquel Williams, Jason Green, Tamika. But before we start, and most people know I'm kind of loath to spend too much time at these substantive meetings to deviate from our usual process. And actually, I was one who moved the proclamations away from regular commission meetings. But we had a special day yesterday in Miami Beach, and we celebrated the birthday of one of our own, Commissioner Alex Fernandez. So we wanted to acknowledge that birthday. We should have had this meeting on your birthday, but I don't know. I hear through the grapevine that we might have something for you as well. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Yes.
Speech. And Commissioner Tanya Bott just reminded me her birthday is March 29th. So,
So you can all plan accordingly.
Well, now I'll turn it over to the Finance Chair, Commissioner Magazine.
Thank you. Again, happy birthday to my colleague. We're here at our second Finance and Budget Workshop. We are concentrating now, of course, across the board, but we're in the previous meeting where we really centered in and honed in on our capital budget. Now we are looking to focus on the operating side of our budget, looking ahead. Of course, when we talk about a budget, it has to be comprehensive, so we're not going to look at it in a vacuum. But I'll go ahead and hand it over to our whether city manager, CFO. I will let staff take direction.
I think at first, I believe the Natalie, who will be clerking the meeting, has just an announcement for the.
Today's meeting of the Finance and Economic Resiliency Committee has been scheduled in a hybrid format with a quorum of the committee physically present and remaining members, staff, and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. In order to participate in today's meeting virtually, members of the public may dial 1-888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 863-6059-5462#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 863-6059-5462. Any individual wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon if they are using the Zoom app, or dial *9 if you are participating by phone. Also, please note Commissioner Bott has requested handouts be placed on the dais for your review.
Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor, Chair, and Commissioners. We are excited to get started with this pivotal step in our budget preparation process. I think this is one of the most engaging times for the budget process throughout the year. We have worked tirelessly to put together recommendations for enhancements. Our department heads have worked with the budget department and with finance to ensure that everything we're putting forward speaks to our collective goals, speaks to the intentions of our community to make our resident experience better, our business experience better. Although we were very heartened by the 9.4% increase up from the 8.8 property value increase that came out on June 1st, the July 1st numbers still present a challenge for us because we have so much need. So today we really want to take time to go through all of the potential enhancements, as well as to touch base on the capital budget with an update toward the end of the presentation. So at this time, I want to turn it over to our CFO, Jason Green, and our Budget Director, Tamika Otto Stewart, to lead us through the presentation. Thank you.
All right, PJ, if you could pull up the presentation. All right. So as Commissioner Magazine mentioned, we will be starting with the operating budget. We will have later on in the presentation an update on the capital budget. So this is a slide we had when we met last month. We had an 8.8% increase in our property tax revenues with our preliminary values as of June 1st. So as Raquel just mentioned, our property values actually increased by 9.4% on July 1st. That brought in about $1.6 million more to our general fund revenues than what we had back in June. So this slide, you should be pretty familiar with it. These show our overall property value. You see the trend is we are increasing, but we are increasing at a declining rate. So 2 years ago, we were at 11.2% increase, then 10.8. Now we're at 9.4 overall, which is a combination of our existing property values. So our properties that existed last year increased by 8.8%. And the next slide shows our new construction, which is very sporadic. We've pretty much leveled off at between $200 to $300 million per year. So we did a slight increase from last month.
So on our millage rates, as we discussed at our June update, was that we had recommended and FERC had endorsed the lower voted debt service for our GO bond that was required based on the increased values we got as of June 1st, and that to be adjusted up into our capital renewal replacement. So we're overall looking at a flat combined millage. Now after that, on July 1st, after the numbers came up a little bit more from the 8.8 to the 9.4, plus when we looked back and we closed the books on the prior fiscal year, we received more revenue than was originally budgeted into the voter debt service millage. So there was a little bit available there to bring that down a little bit more. So we have a slightly different capital replacement. Again, a flat overall combined millage is the initial recommended preliminary millage. And this is another one that you should be familiar with. This just shows the long-term trend of the city's overall combined millage that's decreased since 2011. And our blue bar there is both when we call operating, it's both our general operations, our capital and replacement, and our PAYGO. And those millages, those capital-related millages have increased slowly through the years, mostly related to adjustments when it comes to those voted GO bonds.
So now we're going to share what the budget looks like right now. So the first slide shows what the budget looked like back in June when we met. We had a projected $12.6 million surplus. And based on the July 1 values, that surplus increased to $14.2 million. It's important to note that this does not include any enhancements yet, and it also doesn't include any results of the collective bargaining agreements. So this slide shows where we start at 14.2. We are going to go through several slides with our recommended enhancements for the 25 budget. And then if the commission does accept our recommendations and no changes are made, we would have a surplus of $8.9 million. We know you may want to make some changes to the budget, so that number will be adjusted based on your recommendations today. And just again, what we recommend is that as much as that $8.9 million be set aside for a combination of collective bargaining adjustments and also capital funding. As you know, we have a $1.2 billion CIP, and we want to transfer as much as we can to capital as possible, and at the same time close our collective bargaining agreements.
And so just to add on to there for context, when you look through the overall booklet of all the enhancements that were looked at, both from the administration and the commission side, there was over $30 million in requests for the general fund, all of them, very valid and very important in its own right. But we had to, look at it from an efficiency and transparency perspective to see what we believe that we can afford, what was needed, and what the best use of those dollars were. So next, what we're going to show you these next couple slides are the disposition of funding requests that have been commission referrals that have gone through FERC and then back up to commission. Will be these next two slides, and then the one on FERC ones. So these are items that have been at discussion at the commission level. All of the ones that have a check mark that are listed on this slide and on the next one also are in the preliminary general fund budget. The only one that is not In there is the residential area sidewalk pressure washing program, which would actually not be a general fund expenditure, would actually be a sanitation fund expenditure. And I'm going to hold this, really get into the reasons why we were not recommending that when we get towards the end of the presentation. We have a number of slides, again, to go over, our concerns with the sanitation fund. This is another list this is the final part of the list, the smaller dollar ones of the commission priorities. Again, everyone that was there listed are in the preliminary budget. The only one that was not in the recommended one is the $33,000 for the beach access mats. The issue there from the administration's perspective was, when it comes to a lot of these special events and such that have out these beach access mats, if there is an issue where there's a deficit of that kind of resource, we would just ensure that all of those events, whether city run or run by a third party, that we would enforce the requirements that are already there in their contracts and such to have those available. These are items that haven't made its way back to commission yet, that have been heard at FERC and have received favorable recommendations by FERC, but just haven't made it back to commission yet through the process. Some of them weren't even actually listed as enhancements as of a couple weeks ago until they made it out of FERC. But to the two items here, the one-time business grant and the Miami Beach Police Department LGBTQ outreach initiatives are listed there as items that we are funding in the preliminary budget. It's important to note that it's about $6.5 million that were requested by the commission, and we did recommend funding for about $4.25 million worth of those requests. Now, what we're going to show here is this is the list of the actual general fund enhancements that are proposed to be included in the 2025 general fund budget. So we also looked at themes, right? So one of the things we looked at was, we recently have the resident survey that we reached that is done every several years. And one of the areas they showed is that we are doing very well in the public safety area, but it's still obviously an important priority, by the commission. So we did allocate dollars towards that. Also, the items that came out of that resident survey were infrastructure, homeless, and cleanliness were three areas of concern from the residents, areas of where we believe we will do our best within our confines of our finances to allocate resources towards that. So to that end, what we have here is the list of public safety and homeless related items. On the one time, though the administration did move forward this year without commission action, was the police Israeli high visibility detail, and funded at a higher level. We were projecting a larger $3 million expenditure for this year. But in working with the police department, they believe that, as we move further away from that event, we believe that a $1.9 million one-time allocation would be sufficient to provide a service during this upcoming fiscal year. On the recurring side, we have 4 positions being added to the Real-Time Intelligence Center. The city has invested heavily to build out that facility, and now it is time to staff that, as would make a lot of sense. We have adding to the emergency management division of the fire department, a fire division chief. It is the only area that doesn't have its own division chief. It's being handled directly by the deputy and having many other division chiefs, so we think it's important that we add this position to there. We have the crime lab staffing with Miami-Dade County, which was a commission priority. An additional city attorney 2 position for the municipal prosecution team. For us to continue, we were doing kind of on a one-time as we switched up some funding this year, is for us to continue providing both for the homeless, mental health, and medical health services. Again, the LGBTQ outreach initiatives and body cameras for our homeless. Those are all of our public safety and homeless enhancements. And then education and really from the children's perspective, a number of these are run out of my education performance initiatives division. These include one-time educational enhancements to provide equipment and services on a one-time basis as we expand beyond our public school system, but into our private religious schools. This will provide that. Same thing on now the recurring side, the 224,000 is providing different programs at those schools outside of our public school system, and it includes adding a position to run all of those programs while deducting a $50,000 consulting outsourcing of some of those services. So we removed that outsourcing and we got that all done that way. We think that's an efficient way of doing it. Contracted bus services for after-school programs for our children at our schools. Right now, it's being done internally, pulling people that have CDL licenses off of other programs, doing maintenance, doing facility upkeep through our parks. And the Parks Department would like to just have that as an outsourced service, so it's run on time and our children are being picked up on time and quickly, and that those employees can be actually delivering park services. And then two other educational ones, again, that were commission priorities of additional funding for Rock Ensemble, expanding that and enhancing that at the existing high school and to other schools, and then adding to the pre-K lottery program.
With regard to cleanliness, even though we weren't able to recommend several items on sanitation, what we did is found in parks did a lot of requests, and what we recommended is to add 4 pressure washing machines, and these are the larger ones that you can actually sit and ride, as opposed to what they're doing now is pressure washing by hand. And with those 4 machines, there's a request to add 4 MSW positions, which would basically be in charge of improving the cleanliness of our parks and our parks facilities. The next item in the recurring is the area managers. We're going to have a separate slide on that one, so I'm just going to skip over that, but it is recommended to be funded. For infrastructure, the feasibility study for the compacted sand path was discussed in the June FERC. There was a capital project. What we recommended was funding a study to just get some confirmation that this is feasible and that the state would actually give us permission to move forward. Also at the June FERC, we talked about the pay-go transfer of some of our interest income. So that is already built into our budget, and that's $2 million. And then Parks also asked us to start funding a preventative maintenance program for their aquatic facilities. And this would get them some funding to basically repair our equipment before they get broken. So again, this is a list of several others that don't fall into one of those categories we talked about. The small business grants was already approved by the City Commission. HR asked us to add 1 records technician position. They don't have a dedicated position that actually is responsible for keeping our records and maintaining them. The state lobbyist program already exists in the budget. The City Commission did ask us to add funding for 1 additional state lobbyist. The reclassification of 2 assistant city clerk positions was requested by the city clerk's office. And this is just a parity item where their assistant city clerks aren't at the same level of other assistant directors throughout the organization. Economic development asked for 1 position, a part-time position, to help with the additional work that was transferred for the Sister Cities program. The Film Incentive Program used to be at $100,000. During COVID, we had to reduce that slightly. So we are recommending increasing that by $33,000 to get us back to the $100,000 that we had previously. Sister Cities was also recommended or approved by the City Commission already to increase that by $15,000. And then the beachfront cafe assessments, right now we are not assessing the beachfront cafes, and this would add 40 more assessment for those facilities. And then the last item is it's an admin item. So all internal services are charged back to all the departments. So you'll see some recommendations as we go through the presentation for internal service departments. If those get approved, that would add a portion of their cost to the general fund. So we get back to where we started, which is our recommended enhancements, if they are approved, would get us, after our surplus of $14.2 million, to an $8.9 million surplus.
And again, if I could just, to reinforce that $8.9 million surplus, there's still a lot of needs that are not met. So again, there are not the union contract impacts that are in there. We are negotiating with 5 different unions, and we're at various degrees of those discussions, some much closer than others that haven't started. Plus, we have a number of infrastructure needs, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. So our hope is that between setting aside for capital And for those union contracts, we believe that 8.9 will be sufficient to cover all of those contracts. And again, having anything additional that will be set aside towards capital. And that will be the administration's recommendation in that area. Now, I want to go into the next couple of slides, talk about 3 items that were moved from the FERC, regular FERC meeting directly to here by the committee to just to go over in a little bit more detail, as they didn't make a formal recommendation. The first is the area manager's item. This item included, this is Commissioner Fernandez's item. When we looked at this based on the original item, it was having a person for North Beach, South Beach, and Mid Beach with a vehicle being able to drive around, to be able to identify issues in the neighborhoods, not only to identify them across all of the different departmental spectrums, whether it's homeless, code, sanitation, broken pipes, and all of the pantheon of issues that you can see walking down the street, but not only to report them, but then also to follow up to make sure that those end departments actually execute and complete those tasks. What is in the preliminary budget is kind of a hybrid a little bit. And what the recommendation in the budget is to have one full-time position and a pool of hours that would effectively be able to add 2 part-time excellence assessors. As part of the Education Performance Initiatives Division of Finance, one of the things we do, we have a number of indexes where we go out and we review things and we look at things. And one of them is the Cleanliness Index. And we were looking to modify that to add in more elements that would be looked at. This full-time person would be that cradle to grave person. And right now, the city is already doing this cleanliness assessments throughout the city. This is something that was dormant for quite a long time during COVID and just restarted this fiscal year. So we just have some of that data going out. And I believe you may have just received recently, in the next past couple weeks or month or so, the first LTC with some of those results. So I just want to know the city is out there doing some of this. What this would do is really greatly enhance that. And by this $212,000 enhancement recommendation is this would allow us to have about 10,000 block assessments per year. This would mean that every block throughout the city would be assessed at least 4 times per year. And again, not only is it being assessed and put into an index, that means that there are people looking at things from a pantheon of different areas, and those areas, those items, those issues that they are seeing are instantly sent out to the qualifying departments to rectify those situations. And I think I'll just pause on that as we do for these FERC items that come out, if there's any discussion on this.
Commissioner Fernandez, I think this is a great initiative. When I was campaigning, I said, let's keep things simple. We should have 3 people that quite literally just drive around in golf carts, South Beach, Mid Beach, North Beach, and say, what makes sense, what doesn't, talk to people. I love this idea. Let me turn it over to you to kick this off and how you're envisioning it and what is right and wrong about their assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is an item that I actually began working with the city administration last fiscal year on. I believe we were able to advance on it partially through the reinstatement of the cleanliness assessors that had been discontinued due to the COVID pandemic. The reality is that, our neighborhoods need attention. Our neighborhoods need someone from our city that takes ownership of areas, that identify issues, as was described by the CFO, across the spectrum of all departments, and follows up on those issues. And that's what we get with this. I think the CFO explained it perfectly. And I'm willing to give this a try. It's not what I had envisioned originally, but I think it's a more efficient way of using current resources and adding some extra resources to get us in a better direction.
Great, thank you.
And if I could just make a few comments. Love the thought. A little different than how I was envisioning the implementation. I don't want to get too down into the weeds or granular. Maybe we could talk, at a different form about the exact details. From my perspective, how this is laid out, a bit too bureaucratic. Right? I don't want somebody focusing on, okay, here's our checklist, here's the assessment. I want somebody that maybe comes into City Hall 2 hours per week, and that's just to coordinate with their golf courses. These are people that need to be out in our community, interacting with residents on a proactive basis. So much of our city is reactive, right? People give us complaints and say this, but there's nobody out there saying, you know what, this crosswalk sign has been knocked down on West Avenue for 3 weeks, and I'm the person that's going to go and pick it up. Right, and that's what we need, not somebody that's coming in and hitting checklists and spreadsheets and going through the motions. We need somebody out there. These people should live in our communities because they should have the same care as an employee as you do living here, right? These should be people that their children are crossing these streets because you just have an extra level of care. So again, really supportive of the idea. I don't want to get too down into the weeds, but that's kind of how I'm envisioning how the role evolves.
Mr. Chair, if I may, my view aligns more with your view. My idea was that, you know, let's take Mid Beach for example, or North Beach, you know, there would be actual managers, someone that we know as a commission that owns that area, owns responsibility of that area, of the issues going on there, that is you know, present there on a regular basis, is identifying not only the issues but recurring issues. Why are issues recurring? How do we fix it? What is the cross-departmental issues? Because sometimes, you know, when we look at issues, we see issues from, you know, when our organization sees issues, sometimes it's through, you know, the perception of one department. Okay, this is a public works issue, but sometimes you'll have a public works issue that may overlap with a code enforcement issue, that may overlap with a public safety issue. You know, sometimes, and you need that one person that is seeing it from all those different perspectives. It's kind of similar to the Neighborhood Affairs Division, but it's different because the Neighborhood Affairs Division is more focused on communication, letting residents know about meetings, responding residents' questions about projects, liaising on capital issues and that type of stuff. But these are people that get ahead of the issues before we receive the complaints. If this committee would be so inclined, I'd be willing to see us create these actual area managers. I think that that's what our community wants. I think you hit the nail right on the head when you spoke, because that's what I was envisioning last year. That's what I was hoping for this year. I was just following the recommendation of staff to use a program that we currently have to do it more efficiently. But sometimes when we try to do things more efficiently, also like this, we might end up costing us more money or more time, because it might not get us to where we want to be, to where we need to be. And I think our residents, our businesses, the stakeholders in these corridors need to know, okay, who is the person that's out in the field that is responsible for this area to solve this issue? And when we have these recurring issues, we know this is the person responsible for that area. I'm willing to make a motion, but I'd love to hear feedback from my colleagues on this.
Yeah, Mr. CFO or Madam City Manager, why not in the Neighborhood Affairs Division? Because before Commissioner Fernandez said that, that's kind of what I was envisioning as well.
I think there's a way to perhaps marry the two concepts. I think in terms of accountability and productivity, there is some benefit to having folks that are tasked with certain assignments on a recurring basis so that we know, okay, this is exactly what they're covering. But that's not to the exclusion of, hey, if they see something in between those assessment periods, that they would be able to report that to the appropriate department. So I think there's a way to combine the two concepts.
If I could add to that, I think for the purposes of from the budgetary perspective, is if the commission would like to move into the initial, not the recommended one, but that's fine, the three positions, which would be $350,000, we could shift it to there. But at the disposition of who reports to who and everything, I think I would leave that implementation to the city manager, if that's acceptable. But the program itself we would stand up. So this is about getting the funding. So there's not motions because it's a workshop, but if through consensus of the group was to shift that up to the higher level one, we can absolutely do that. But if there's a consensus to do that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Suarez is on the line and would like to speak.
And we have to? Yes? Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I think two thoughts. I think Commissioner Fernandez is right. If we're going to do this, we have to do it right, because if we have one area manager, the program is going to fail for Mid Beach, South Beach, and North Beach. Now, what I think where we can marry the two ideas is, we currently have 3 neighborhood positions for communications. Personally, I think that can be consolidated down to 1, and the area managers should have 3 positions. And so, because being involved in the community, I do believe being proactive, you need 3 different area managers. Every, Mid Beach, South Beach, North Beach are somewhat different in the respects of needs, but communication is pretty standard across the whole beach. So if I can offer that friendly suggestion, that's how I think we could marry the two.
Okay, so I think where we're at now, we can support the concept, and then we have maybe the willingness of the city manager to involve certainly Commissioner Fernandez, but maybe us collectively as a body to how exactly this position takes shape.
Yes, I think we can work through the details on how those area managers would be situated within the organization.
And Mr. Chair, and I just want to understand, just want to make sure I understand the investment that we're making here. Because what is being recommended to us is 1 full-time position and the equivalent of 2 part-time positions for a cost of $212,000. Is that correct?
Correct. There are a few other elements in there, vehicles, some software, and things like that.
Okay. So that's $212,000, where we do not end up with an area manager in each area of our city. 212. But for 350, which, it's more, but it's, when you look at it, you got 3 area managers, 3 full-time people, 1 person dedicated to each area of the city. To me, I don't know, I think we're getting a better investment with that ultimately. So I echo what you mentioned. I'd love to see how the city manager could work in creating these positions. I do think we have a good operation in the Neighborhood Affairs Division. They serve a very important function right now, liaising with the neighborhoods, and I seen them be of tremendous value to our residents, and I wouldn't want to touch there something that I think is actually working. If it ain't broken, don't fix it, is kind of how I feel, and I think they do tremendous work. But I see the need for these 3 extra positions, and I think our money goes a longer way with the area manager as opposed to the hybrid. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and if we're looking to save money, I'd rather have these people that are out proactively and accessible in the community. And I'll do my monthly golf cart plug in a golf cart rather than a high-priced gas-guzzling SUV. Commissioner Bott.
I would like to just request that these are residents of the city, these employees. It doesn't need to be that the North Beach area captain is a North Beach resident, but, I am a huge user of the eGov app, because as I go around town, whether it's walking my dogs in my neighborhood or running down to 5th and Washington for a meeting and I see something amiss, I just pop it into the app. And I think that people who are living here and doing, whatever they do on their off hours will enhance the net effect of this, and also be able to have cross-pollinate between their colleagues. So that would be I know that's an initiative we're moving towards anyhow, but I would say that that should be a requirement for this, for these positions.
If I could just invite our HR director forward, I'm not sure that we can require or mandate that, and perhaps our city attorney is on. I know that we have a resident preference, and we assign certain privileges to residents who are applicants of positions, but I'm not sure that we could make that a mandatory requirement.
Yes, thank you, City Manager Marla Alpizar, City of Miami Beach HR Director. I would want to be very careful in consulting with the city attorney as to whether or not that would be a mandatory requirement and possibility.
So just to get back to I believe if we get consensus that we would adjust this to the $350,000 funding level. Am I seeing everyone is okay with that?
Commissioner
Okay.
Suarez is on the line, requesting to speak.
Can I say something? I don't know how to raise my hand on this Zoom. Hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, hi everyone. First and foremost, it's one of the first times that I'm observing everyone on Zoom, and I would tell PJ that, you know, while the camera systems are great, the lighting is off. All of you guys are blurry, and I think that, I don't know if we need to tweak the system, but I will tell you that what we had before versus what we had now was much better. Here's how I feel about it needs to get improved. I don't know if we need to bring in an expert, but people watching the meetings, it's not Miami Beach quality, and we need to bring it up to par. That's the first thing I have to say. Number two is, Alex, Commissioner Fernandez, I'd like to, first of all, say happy birthday. And second of all, I love this idea of being proactive. Like Commissioner Magazine said so many times, we are, reactive. And I think that once we have somebody who's really the point person, because poor Kevin, everything gets dumped on Kevin, right? And Kevin has to do all these community meetings, but these people should be in charge of like a monthly meeting too. I want every resident, for example, of North Beach to know that every single month they're going to be able to go and have a city representative at that meeting with the entire administration present, and they can, voice any concerns they have. So I think it's also important, when we hire these people to let them know that, it's not just like driving around the city. You're also going to have several monthly meetings, and I think it will be a huge improvement, and I'm all for this.
All right. If we
Thanks.
just to continue, then we'll go ahead and make that adjustment in the preliminary budget, and we'll move on.
And please don't forget about the cameras. Terrible, terrible, terrible.
Thank you.
So
I mean, you all are good looking, but not with these cameras.
Okay, so this slide is about the code compliance area captains. This item was addressed at yesterday's neighborhoods meeting, so there will be a return to the neighborhoods committee. So we're gonna skip past this one. And then this was a final item that was moved from the June 28th FERC to this meeting to be discussed. So PD in their budget process had asked for one additional detention officer, and this was supposed to help the officers increase their time on the streets and reduce their time transporting prisoners. So when Commissioner Bott brought this item, PD actually increased that request from one position to 2 detention officers. It's not included in the budget at this point. If the committee does recommend it, we would be adding $344,000 for year 1 to add 2 detention officers. They currently have 8 budgeted positions. This would bring them up to 10.
So we're all trying to work smarter and make better decisions with how we allocate our resources. So it's I'm adding headcount, or recommending that we add headcount with the awareness that this is a cost that we carry through. But our city, our residents are demanding, and we all are, as elected officials, are here because we all want to see a safer city every day of the year, not just during high impact events or time periods. And in order to facilitate that and to use our incredibly well-trained and excellent police force to the best of our ability, doing things to prevent bad things from happening in the first place. It doesn't make sense to use a couple of sworn officers, pulling them off their assigned job for the day, or their assigned beat for the day, to babysit guys, men and women who get arrested and have to be put into our local Miami Beach jail and then transport them over to the mainland. So that's not a great use of our very highly trained officers, but getting people into the system who are specialists in this, who will alleviate that usage, I think is a good reason to expand our headcount. And that is why I brought this item.
Thank you. And I do maybe take things a little bit out of order. Mayor Minor, not to put you on the spot, but I know that you have some other responsibilities and perhaps want to get out of anything that you want to highlight here. I want to give you the utmost respect. If there's anything throughout here that you want to call to our attention that's important or critical to you. If not, we'll continue going through, but I want to give you
Keep going through.
Perfect.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Do we need to vote on this enhancement? Or?
This is a workshop, there's not a technical vote, so as of right now, it is not in the preliminary budget, so we'd have to get direction via consensus to take this from the surplus.
I want to echo the importance of this. It really does. I think it helps us make sure, as Commissioner Bond mentioned, ensure that we have our police officers on the streets instead of babysitting. And so, to the extent that this helps us be a little bit more efficient with our officers, I'm really very supportive of this.
If I could add, if there is an intention to add, would it be at the one that was requested by the police department, or a second one, moving from 8 to 9 full-time positions, or moving from 8 to 10 full-time positions?
Yeah,
Adding two,
yeah, we need the
344,000.
two. I mean, the Commissioner Bond's initiative was to provide more than what was being requested by the department, because I think we want to make sure that when we're asking our police officers to enforce every single code and every single law that we have in the books, that they also have the sufficient resources so that they're not held up in the jail, they're not held up processing, and they can continue with that enforcement we need them to be doing in the community. And so, this is great. This is great, Commissioner Bond. This is where we need to be going to enhance our public safety.
So we have consensus to add this to the preliminary budget. Okay, thank you.
I have a question, another question. The problem child, that's how I roll. For items that did not get called at the last commission meeting, that would be budget enhancements, or that are added and have not gone through the budget commission meeting, is this the right time to have conversations about them?
Commissioner, yeah, this could be an appropriate time to, if there's any floor amendments, I guess, to add items that are not currently either in the preliminary budget or from the enhancement list.
Okay, so through the chair, if I may. Yeah, please. There were two items that were on the agenda for the June commission meeting that didn't get heard. They were funding for two different studies. One was the study to really get some good hard data from the economic impact, return on investment, and costs for the MXE district. The last time that was done was well before COVID. It was an effort spearheaded initially by the late, great Commissioner Mark Samuelin. But, the world has changed very dramatically since COVID, and to be making pretty significant policy decisions about the future of our city, the future direction of our city, what we want to move to, without significant understanding of what it costs, what the benefits are, what the impacts are, is, in my view, a dangerous road to travel down. And so spending a relatively small amount of money to get data and facts as a benchmark and to see the trend lines, I think needs to be included in our budget for next year, because otherwise we're just shooting in the dark. It was the item, it was just fund a study for an economic impact review of the MXC on Ocean Drive. So that we could understand both the benefits of what it's bringing in and also the costs of what it's costing us, and we can make decisions based on information rather than emotion.
Can't just contract that out to Mitch.
Like I said, information, not just emotion.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. As we're discussing items that haven't gone through the FERC process, the Animal Welfare Committee had put forth a motion in the last couple weeks for funding, and I don't have the exact dollar amount, but for funding to assess helping control the community cat problem. So a couple meetings ago, one of the commissioners put forth for cat trapping, neuter, and release, and to have it done as quickly as possible. But the Animal Welfare Committee needs help in determining how many cats do we have, what do we do. On a side note, I met with the county this week, and I'm in discussions of their help for surgeries and that side of it. But the Animal Welfare Committee is looking for somebody to help assess how many cats we have.
And not that I'm an expert in this area, but it seems like a nominal amount that would be in the 5,000, 10,000 range.
If I had to give a number, I'd probably say 20, but more to come. Yeah.
And Mr. Chair,
Yep.
you know, one of the things that has not been approved yet, I think by the commission, it went to FERC in May, but I don't think it's made its way back to commission yet, is the intensity and density capacity analysis. Which I don't see it being recommended here, but I think it's something that our planning department spoke about at our land use committee meeting. I think the last one that we had done was about almost 20 years ago, Tom, if that's correct, almost 20 years ago, where we look at our land development regulations and all the development that's allowed, and how much of that has been used, how much of that has not been used. I think it's important information for us to have as we're considering changes to the LDRs, as we're considering residential incentives, FAR incentives, height incentives, to understand what is currently allowed, what's been used, what hasn't been used, the condition of infrastructure, the condition of roadways, and other types of essential services before we continue doing these changes in our LDRs. We need to know how we're doing now. And that's a request that I have here that I don't think it's funded as of yet, but along the study that Commissioner Bott was mentioning, I wanted to place this one on the record.
Yes, and I do believe that that is listed in the FERC priority enhancements. It is just not part of the recommendation. I do like the fact that that is a one-time as opposed to recurring. You know, we can go a number of different ways here. Certainly, we all have our issues and priorities, and we can keep adding. I do think that the ones that have been brought up are very good and critical, but I also do think that we need to be mindful and perhaps evaluate if there's anything that perhaps is being recommended, that if we're adding things here, you know, it's not an infinite pie. We have a finite pie here. If there are any, this has all been skewed one way, right? Things that have been funded, things that have been not funded and not recommended that we're essentially looking to include back. Happy to, if things are important, Commissioner Fernandez, if that study is important, happy to support it. Same with you, Commissioner Bott. But I'd also ask my colleagues if we can kind of look through and say, is there anything that may be recommended that perhaps we feel we can almost make a trade-off? Yeah.
So if I may, I actually had 4 things to bring up, so I brought up one. The second was a second study, less expensive study, was an analysis to determine the possibility of doing like a mini version of the Paycheck Protection Program, should we have a spring break curfew for non-salaried employees? Everybody talks about the impact for businesses, but the people I'm most concerned about protecting are the barbacks and the servers and the hosts, because they are the ones who are really living mostly paycheck to paycheck. And so I think that is a worthwhile thing to investigate if that's a thing that we can do. We're doing a program for $100,000 for getting people through the month of August and September, when that's just a regularly occurring business condition. I mean, it gets hot and tourists go down in August and September. To me, it seems like, you know, if we're telling businesses we are shutting you down for your two biggest weekends in March, we want to help them with the appropriate protections for against fraud, to make sure that the people who are doing the hardest work and are the least able to bounce through that are not penalized through our decision to keep our communities safe. So that's the second one. And then there are two sort of arts and culture items that are, one is smaller, one is bigger, but the two organizations involved are available to speak on them. So I don't know if you, and I want to get the meeting back on track as well, but this is important, and I think it's important to have the conversation now so that when the finance team comes back to us with their proposed budget, it's included as a placeholder and we can finesse the details, but that we're not scrambling in 6 weeks when we could have had the discussion now for 5 minutes and determine if there's an appetite to go forward, because these are two incredibly impactful organizations. One in North Beach, the Normandy Fountain Business Association, as if you can see through the memo that I sent in, is one of the best business development ROI examples that we have anywhere in the city. The list of businesses that have opened up in the last number of years through the type of programming that's happening for very low cost per program, to build community, to make this neighborhood center appealing, attractive, bring people to wander through for the event and then go to the restaurants. We have a fine arts gallery that is the talk of the town during Art Basel every year and is featured in the New York Times. I mean,
Yeah, and the second one?
the second, sorry, okay.
And then if you could quantify the amounts for maybe the paycheck protection and then the two arts and culture.
Yeah, so the paycheck protection was something that was brought up at commission, or was scheduled to be brought up at commission. We didn't hear it. I think that was a $60,000 study.
I recall maybe it was up to 75K. I'm not.
It's not on the list of enhancements. I'm not.
I think it was listed as up to 75K.
Yeah, but it might not be that much. We just wanted to have some amount of money in there, because the initial thought was maybe we can do it in-house. But when we talked about what we're looking for, it made sense. There's a more efficient use of funds to get somebody who specializes in this, who can take the studies that we've had done in the past and build off of that, so that it's a continuum and it's not pulling resources off, trying to scramble and get information. The enhancement for the Normandy Fountain Business Association, my stretch goal would be 30, and we could go to between 20 and 30 for that. Currently, they spend a little over $1,000 an event. That contrasts with what the city had been doing with an outside organization at $10,000 an event. That was so ineffective that the city ended the program. So there's a lot of backup information here, but I think that is an incredibly useful expenditure of money. And in addition, the Fountain Association gets matching funds based on, so if we give them $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, they get a matching amount to match those funds that we give them. So that's the one. The second one is the Miami New Drama. It is one of the cultural anchors in our city. It has an incredible track record. They are expanding their programming. They are sending not one, but two shows to Broadway, which is, a moonshot. It doesn't happen. To have two shows originating in Miami Beach, going to Broadway is tremendous as we talk about changing our cultural brand, changing our brand awareness, our brand image around the world. It is incredible. And they are also funded at a very different level than some of the other significant cultural anchors. And we've got money in the budget to do beautiful suggested work from the outside of the theater, which is great, but it's even more important to ensure that the theater is able to do what it needs to do on the inside and move forward that way. So there is a very robust economic impact study that is attached to this document. This is an enhancement to their agreement. It was the agreement, this could have been done last year, but it came up too late in the process. So I don't want it to come up too late in the process again this year. My ask here would be to put in a placeholder, and then over the next 6 weeks, as the finance team is working on the budget, that that tourism and culture and Miami New Drama work through the actual details of what they need, so that we are not surprised in September with an ask.
And, and what is that placeholder? And then I'll go to you, Commissioner Fernandez.
The placeholder would be approximately $220,000 to increase their management.
Yep, thank you. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just want to ask Commissioner Bond a question and possibly make a statement. Is this to address the cuts by the governor, the veto by the governor? This is separate?
This is a separate management agreement, ongoing management agreement.
Are we going to be having at some point a separate discussion? I know you sponsored an item, but I do think it is so pivotal as part of this budget that we discuss $30 million veto to the arts that the governor did. That we need to be looking at that. That impacts so many of our organizations, including Miami New Drama, including Young Musicians United, the Miami Symphony, Miami City Ballet, Old Cinema.
Right.
The list goes on and on and on. And our voters have approved over $159 million in GO bonds for our arts, and our residents have spoken about their commitment to that. So we really do need to have that conversation, because last year the governor, signed the $60 million art funding, and then this year, here he is, he's vetoing half of that. I think you had sponsored an item on that.
Right, and so that was heard that was referred at the last commission meeting. It is a very specific, up to about $1.4 million to address very specific needs for the arts organizations. I mean, the $30 million that you're talking about is statewide. So for anyone listening out in the audience, we're not suggesting adding $30 million to our budget. So everybody calm down. But so
I'm already getting a little worked up.
Yeah, especially you, Joe. You calm down. No, but what I had brought to commission, what we're going to hear at finance, at a regular finance meeting soon, is very targeted up to, but not necessarily all the way up to $1.4 million for the most needed, for the most necessary organizations, and targeted probably towards ensuring that we don't lose jobs, because that would be a very unfortunate unintended consequence. I know that the organizations are going out to do fundraising, as they should, but I'm very interested in protecting the people who work there and the economic impact that is driven by these arts organizations.
And just to wrap that up, and you kind of like alluded to it. I mean, there's people like George Perez and others. George Perez from Related, donated his $10 million condo to the Miami Foundation to help offset this shortfall. But for us as a city, the stakes are so high because we've worked so hard to distance ourselves from spring break and shift our focus to the arts. And I do really agree with you. This one-time allocation for arts organizations is needed, and it's needed now. While we continue to work with our colleagues, the incoming Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, and the Governor, so that we can solve this for next year. But in the meantime, we have a gap we have to fix now for this year, because it is part of the shift we're trying to make as a city, what we're trying to distance ourselves from and where we're trying to go towards, and that is, a more arts and cultural centric community.
And I
Thank you,
would
Mr.
just,
Chair.
Commissioner Dominguez, jump in.
Thank you. Yeah, in the last couple days, I did speak with Miami New Drama and their management agreement, and what he expressed was that inflation has gone up in the last 5 years from when the management agreement was first put up, but that the governor's veto was also part of the reason why they needed this.
And I'll just say, I'm not talking about any specific item. This is just as we're going through here. We have a finite pie, right? And we've been blessed and benefited by 3 straight years of near double-digit property tax increases. And I think it's incumbent upon us to realize that that gravy train is not going to go on forever. So not any one specific item, but we do need to essentially not always spend as if this is going to happen forever. And especially when we look at our previous meeting, our last meeting, when we have all of these capital underfunding projects that we have. I know I only bring this up because I know it's passionate for a lot of people, but the fire station, right? The only way that the new change is going to get funded is if over the next 3 years, we have money from a surplus that we can essentially allocate towards that. So I'm not saying that we can't do any of these. I'm not saying I'm not going to be supportive of any of these, but we have a finite pie, and these are all important. And if we were the federal government, we would just do all of them and not worry about it and just borrow. But we're not. We have to have a balanced budget, not just for this year. But my worry is for the years going forward when we're not blessed with such high property valuations, and when we're also then on the other side of the union negotiations, and then when we have all of these very important capital underfunded projects, we're going to need money from there as well. So it's a finite pie, and the more we put other places, the less we're going to have that's going to go to some of those things like the Lincoln Road capital project, the fire station 1, if we decide to move in those directions. So,
But Mr. Chair,
yeah.
if I may, one of the things I would like to encourage the CFO to look into is to see, because so much, especially as it relates to the arts and the arts funding, so much is related to tourism as well, to our tourism-dependent revenues and economy. And how this veto by the governor could hurt those institutions that is a direct, then hurting directly our tourist economy. I think we have about, a 40 million resort tax reserve, is it about?
Yeah.
Yes.
The reserves.
Yes. Perhaps we could, if you could study the possibility, to what extent, could we look at the resort tax funds that we have to help these organizations that desperately need it with this one-time support while we work on our relationships with the state so that next year we don't face the same issue. If you could look into that and get back to us on that.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Suarez is on the line. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I think it's also necessary, like Commissioner Magazine said, so let's look at the whole pie before we make any definitive decisions on what to fund. I think the presentation needs to continue. Been on hold for the last 20 minutes. I think we definitely need to make sure we go over our priorities as a city and the basics: public safety, cleanliness. And so let's cover those topics as a whole before we make any sort of decisions now.
Chair, if you're okay with that, we'll continue with the presentation to the end, and then we can go back to debate. Okay, thank you. So
we're moving on to resort tax. So just a quick update on when we last met last month. And the update is there is no update. Resort tax revenues have been trending below what we budgeted this year. And so for next year's budget, we're trending lower. We've been about 5% below what we budgeted. And so for resort tax, we are actually just not recommending any enhancements from that fund next year.
The only element in the resort tax I just want to go into a little bit is an item that was at FERC, was related to a fitness festival. It was referred to FERC for a March 2025 during Spring Break Fitness Festival. At FERC, it was shifted as the recommendation to be a March of 2026 fitness festival. The estimated budget, based on discussions with TCD, was approximately $1.4 million to take on this initiative. It's important to note the administration's recommendation is that we continue for 2 additional years to not have any activations during the month of March, which is our spring break, for 2025 and 2026.
And not to interrupt you, Mr. CFO, but to interrupt you. Fine with that for 2025. I do think, you know, when we're thinking about things like a Paycheck Protection Act and curfews, we have done a fantastic job rebranding. Melissa's team, I'll give her another shout out. We just have a new video that's fantastic that just launched. But we need to think about, we've decided who we don't want to be. Now we need to really pivot to who we want to be. My thought for not doing it for 2025 is not just not to have an activation, but I don't want to be hasty and kind of put half a foot forward. I'd rather plan well. I think we have adequate time to do that for 2026. So me personally, I'll see how my colleagues feel. I'm not going to be supportive of extending just that kind of blanket ban through 2026. Now, that doesn't mean we have Ultra Music Fest on our beach, but I think something like a fitness festival starts rebranding us in the way that we want to be positioned.
And if you don't mind, let me chime in. This was one of my items. I think Commissioner Magazine's correct in the sense that we need to desperately rebrand ourselves, especially during spring break. We shouldn't be branded as the curfew city. You know, I think Miami Beach is the perfect place for fitness, especially in the month of March. And instead of shootings, we're going to have barbells and pull-ups and events, hopefully from High Rocks and CrossFit. And it really could completely change the image. And the month of March, similar to what happened with Memorial Day weekend and the RNC show. I think for next spring break, I just feel the general consensus is best to repeat what we did last year. But the following, it's important that we finally make the move in the right direction and relabel us from the city that we want to be. There's a lot of special interests that want to do a mega concert. I'm not going to be in favor of that. I think fitness would be the perfect synergy for Miami Beach. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may. So, I think this is a super idea. We've seen it work other places. It is part of the overall change of direction that we are talking about and have been talking about for a couple of years. The residents, the business owners, the commission, the staff, the arts and culture and fitness and rebranding, like it all fits into a general shift. The Blue Zone City initiative that my colleagues supported me on in our last meeting. It's all turning the battleship. We had the American Black Film Festival here a couple weeks ago, and even in the torrential rains, we had lines around the block going in to see an event at the New World Center. And so whether you're talking about stuffy bow ties, classical music, or screenings, or High Rocks Festival out on the beach, this is all under the rubric of arts and culture. And whether it's fitness or something more traditional, it is changing the conversation about the city. So if you want to come and party till you drop, by all means, we got that too. But we've got that you can do that on a Saturday night, and then the entire rest of the week you've got other stuff to do if you want to. So it's not diminishing one to make room for another. It's all additive. So I'm very supportive of this.
Through the chair, if I just may add one consideration, to the extent that we do want to modify our spring break game plan and with the information that we received from Miami-Dade County as it relates to mutual aid agreements and potential costs for public safety from area entities, we may need to strongly consider resource allocation for enhanced public safety professionals from outside agencies during these times, especially if we're going to be reintroducing activities during high impact periods of the year. So just putting it out there that we may also need to consider resources that we currently do not have to account for under our existing mutual aid agreement. And to the extent that the new sheriff wants to continue in the fashion that Miami-Dade County may want to act, I think we have to think about those things going forward.
Yep. And just to clarify, we're not talking about for this next spring break coming up. We're talking about for the
26.
following one. So when we're talking about additional resources for public safety, we can have those discussions a year from now. But given the high price tag, we want to start thinking about slowly allocating money 2 years in advance. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for clarifying that, because I believe what I'm hearing from the day is a desire to continue into 2025 with the policies and the structure that we had this year that kept our city safe and secured during this spring break, and providing us with enough time over a year, 2 years, to really program ourselves properly and do that shift into 2026, that long-term view. I also I like to get some clarity, because right now, the Miami-Dade Police Department falls under the purview of the county government, but we have this new constitutional office that is the sheriff. And so what does this shift towards the new constitutional office with the sheriff mean for the mutual aid agreement? Would that now shift from the purview of the county mayor and the Board of County Commissioners to the purview of a sheriff who might have more independent discretion as to how to handle the allocation of these police resources that we've been depending on during spring break?
Through the chair.
Yes.
So we do not know what the administrative requirements will be. We do not know what the regulatory requirements will be once the sheriff's office is implemented, but I can only imagine that it will be under the purview of the sheriff, and perhaps a new mutual aid agreement will be established at that time to coincide with the establishment of the sheriff's office.
Okay. All right. So that's important to keep in mind then as we talk about 2026 and potential costs, because that's going to be an elected position that also responds to our community, and that is going to be responsible to look after the safety of our community. So I just wanted to put that perspective out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Manager.
So it sounds like there's a consensus that the commission would want to move forward in March of 26. So if we do that, and if we could bring the slide back up, we have a recommendation of talking about how we would fund that. The reason we're talking about it, as the chair had said, it is a fairly large number of $1.4 million. So how do we prepare for that? And also, in talking to the tourism department, they wanted to, I think that some of these vendors would want to ensure that there's dollars being, set aside and allocated, appropriated towards that event. So in 2024, the commission added a pool for large-scale community events of approximately $600,000. How we could get to the 1.4 million is to have $500,000 for 25, $500,000 for 26. So that would still leave $100,000 in the pool for smaller events that come up through the fiscal year that didn't go through the budget process that would be available for the commission to appropriate. Now, to put this together, you got $1 million. That still is a $400,000 short. So the commission could either allocate that $400,000 one time in this budget. It could split it or it could fund it all in 2026 to have the decision there. We don't think we need to have a decision right this second, but we'll kind of put it on the list, I guess, because we now have a number of items that are in debate. Some commissioners have added for discussion, so we'll add that item there, and I think when we come back at the end, we'll discuss where we're going to land with the surplus available for our contracts.
Certainly, I'll get my colleagues' intake. I'm never one for kicking the can down the road, but I think this is we're doing this 100%. We're all in line with that. But in terms of funding, that $400,000 that's outstanding, I would prefer to do so next year. The thought being, I think there's tremendous opportunities out there to go and get sponsorships for things like that. And maybe we could fund it now and see if we can do that and get it back. But, I think we have tremendous opportunity in front of us to go and get some world-class sponsors if we're really, really behind this event. And that's how we could essentially find that $400,000 gap. And if we can't, then we allocate it next year as the highest priority item. But I think that's where I'd come out.
Thank you. Oh. So next, we're going to go into the spotlight on the sanitation fund as we had discussed.
Okay, so as we mentioned at the budget retreat back in May, we wanted to do a spotlight this year on sanitation, and that's because they have a structural imbalance in their budget. So this slide shows the FY24 adopted budget. The projected revenues were 23.8 million, expenditures were 24.8. So they were at a deficit of $1 million, which we funded using their available fund balance. This slide basically shows next year's budget, so that gap of 1 million has now grown to 2.8, and not structurally balanced, not best practices for the fund. This chart shows the fund balance trend. As you can see, we started falling off in our fund balance in 2017. We actually did do a spotlight, a zero-based budget analysis on sanitation back then, just before COVID, made some recommendations. Some were accepted, some were not. We did have a spike in 2021. We had some FEMA reimbursements, so it artificially inflated the fund balance. And as you can see now, it's trending back down again. Based on where we are right now in the 25 budget, we'd be down to 3.6 million in their available fund balance, and this is over their set aside 25% reserves. If we continue on this trend, we think in the next couple of years, this fund balance would be zero.
So we'll talk about a few of the sanitation budget balancing strategies. We went through this same exact slide at the retreat in May. Commissioner Bott has moved forward a couple of referrals to finance, which will be discussed hopefully later this month, related to both the intermediate short-term related items and the longer term. So we don't debate in the specifics of it, I'll just highlight. These are, so, we often look at the expenditure side, but we have to look at the revenue side. So I know that the referral items will talk about looking at the definition of what a roll-off contractor is, what the roll-off franchise fee is, then also looking at the fact that single-family homes are not charged the weekly recycling services fee, which is, I think, around $7 or $8 a month is what it would be. And then in the longer term, which is really the more impactful and the most amount of dollars, is both the single-family home franchise waste hauler contracts and the multifamily, which is now going through it's been going through a process for a while. I think we restarted that. There's a consultant that's been engaged or is in the process of being engaged to look at those, bringing some good dollars into that fund. And I think when we look at that structural deficit, we look at enhancements that are being added, and we know that the residents are asking for a lot of these services. I think the commission will have to look very strongly at those franchise fee rates. If it's 20%, it might end up being 35%. But to bring in the revenues to erase that structural deficit and deliver the level of services that the commission would like to deliver to those residents. And that is something for a longer term discussion that will happen at FERC and will happen throughout the process of those contracts over the next 6-9 months, a year, and such like that.
And Jason, I know one of the items that did not get your recommendation is the residential area sidewalk pressure washing program. And I know a number of us thought, man, that is something our residents notice walking out the door. And how I look at that is, if I'm in the elevator of my condo and somebody gets on halfway down, they go, oh, what are you working on? I have 30 seconds to tell them, public safety, we're cleaning the city up, we're making it look better. That's one of the first things that people notice walking out of their door. Is that able to be out of the sanitation budget? Where could we envision that come from?
That type of service is something that would be through our sanitation fund. So here's the list of the sanitation enhancements, as you had mentioned. There were a couple of different items, both from the administrative side. We always are transparent. The administration always delivers all of the enhancement requests from the departments. Whether they end up being recommended because of funding needs is another thing. So the items that came through on the commission side were the $1.5 million for the residential area sidewalk pressure washing program, and then the enhanced level of waterway maintenance and cleanup through that waterway maintenance contract. The administration did, absolutely understanding that cleanliness is important. It shows up in our resident survey, but based on the fact that the structural deficit here is already so great, but we did move forward and are recommending the $290,000 increase in the level of service and funding towards the waterway cleanup program, but not on the pressure washing.
So
I think it's,
if I could ask, then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Fernandez. So the bulk of the cost for the sidewalk pressure washing program is through personnel, because I see 12 full-time positions. So essentially, if we would say, you know what, why don't maybe we don't have the full $1.5 million, but let's really go ahead and get this program kickstarted, and we essentially have that. Essentially, it's just less personnel. So we could start the program, see what half of that funding essentially gets us. And it's not as if, there's some sort of capital expenditure that we're not getting. It would just be less personnel. Is that correct?
And if I may.
Yep, just because I promised to Commissioner
okay,
go.
You guys are
Yep,
working on
go
this
ahead,
together.
Commissioner Suarez, then Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Like Commissioner Magazine said, the one thing that people are going to notice the most is that when they walk outside their house, their sidewalks are going to be clean. Right now, there is absolutely zero pressure washing in residential neighborhoods. It's never been done before. And the one thing that we can do, when all of our residents walk outside, go on a walk, leave their homes, they're going to see a difference that our administration can make today for this fiscal year. This program is semi-annual, so every 6 months, residents are going to have the luxury of walking outside and having somewhat of a brand new sidewalk. That to me is invaluable. One of the items that I believe was there before was the parks pressure washing. Maybe we can combine the two so that the residential pressure washing crew also does parks to be a little bit more efficient. But, like I said, of all the things that we can pass for sanitation, this is what's going to be seen the most and felt the most by residents. For those who have campaigned this last year, one of the biggest issues was, my neighborhood is filthy. I think we really need to address that, and this is a start, because I think our sanitation budget was only 4% of our overall budget. I want to make sure that Miami Beach is just as clean as Disney World. It's clean everywhere, and so I'm hoping to get the support of my colleagues on ensuring that this program moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is, the cleanliness of our city is of incredible importance. So I just have a couple of questions. As Commissioner Suarez just mentioned, this would be for 2 pressure washings a year. Is that correct?
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
Yep. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Brad. So this is for 2 pressure washings a year?
Yeah, It would
Okay.
be twice a year service in residential communities.
Right now, we do it on commercial corridors, is that correct?
Right, it's done on commercial and, in areas where, some multifamily benefit from that because they're mixed use, but yes, it's done typically in commercial areas.
Okay, but let me ask you about this, because like, for example, I think that this is probably, like, for example, you go down the street I live in, Chase Avenue. There's not that much traffic, pedestrian traffic there. There's not that intensity there. So it's probably not as needed there as perhaps like West Avenue, where Commissioner Magazine lives, where you have a lot of buildings, a lot of density concentrated there, people walking with their pets, it's just a different type of intensity. Have we looked at the possibility, or Flamingo Park, let's say, Flamingo Park? It's very different than an area where you only have single-family homes. Is, in the area where you may have 5 people living in a single-family home, you may have, 50, 60 people living in an area like Flamingo Park. Have you guys done an assessment to see, what would be the cost if we did it more in the multifamily, focusing more on the multifamily residential districts, where I believe it's probably the bigger issue, as opposed to the single-family residential areas, where I would venture to say probably you probably already have this going on in the single-family residential areas by the homeowners. Who are mindful and attentive to what's happening outside their home. They probably have, a lot of them have, landscapers or people that come by on a regular basis and provide some sort of cleaning of their property. And so just wondering if we've just focused on the more
And if I could
multifamily
piggyback on
areas.
that, because I agree with those comments. And then also, if it is correct, we haven't done it ever, perhaps we start with once a year, particularly in some of those single-family areas, because if it is a personnel issue, and that's a way to essentially almost roll this out as ease into this program at a slightly more cost burdensome price point.
Yeah, I think we can, try to accommodate it any way that we can. I think as long as we have the personnel in place, maybe we can go, say maybe residential once a year, we can then do as well, the multifamily. There's just different ways to do it. I think it's really about having, enough staff to be able to accomplish these things. But I think there's always ways to modify schedules to do it.
And I like what the chair is saying. It's good wisdom, because, okay, so you establish a baseline for once a year. But now we're also going to have area managers that are going to be taking an eye keeping an eye on these areas, where if you need it more frequently in one of those areas, now we have someone that can take the initiative and say, hey, listen, we need this service more over here. They can pick up the phone, call Public Works, make that call to deploy more services there that goes beyond, that baseline, if there is an area that needs it more frequently.
Yeah, so perhaps, and I want to get the sponsors' thoughts, if we would essentially ease into this and roll this out, but recognizing this absolutely critically important, and perhaps roll it out at essentially, right now, nothing's being recommended, but essentially if we would say
we have to do
half
this.
of that, we move forward with it, but what's budgeted, we start with half of that. It gives us at a minimum 1 time per year cleaning, but with Commissioner Fernandez's recommendation, the area managers, where they go, it's more important to focus on West Avenue versus Chase Avenue. Not that I'm trying to manifest that,
but it's what makes sense.
Yep. Colleagues?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Can you guys hear me?
No.
Thanks.
Yes.
Look, yes, all valid points. I'm totally okay with kind of easing into it, but between Commissioner Fernandez and Commissioner Magazine, you're right. Some areas may not need it as much as others. Originally, when I brought this item forward, I did not want to neglect Mid Beach. I did not want to neglect North Beach. So, when I went to the sanitation team, I said, I'd like to have pressure washing residential neighborhoods for each part of Miami Beach, so that North Beach doesn't get left out. or Mid Beach doesn't get left out. You know, now that we're potentially going to have area managers, you know, this is going to be a great tool for them where they can sort of trade personnel for time. Maybe certain areas need it more than others. So I'm totally open to the idea of just of opening the program. I want to start with 2 times a year. I thought that was enough, given the fact that it's never been done before. So every 6 months you have a new sidewalk. I personally love that idea. But if you guys want to start with just one and then kind of get feedback from the residents, I'm okay with that as well.
And just kind of to, you know, piggyback on some of those comments, like, you know, it's such great wisdom not to exempt areas of our city and the inclusive approach that the sponsors took. Because, like, for example, you look at some of our residential areas where you have single family homes, but you also have close to them, you have multifamily. And I'm thinking, like, in Collins Park, you have, you know, that Flamingo Drive area, you know, further south around the Women's Club and all that. It's very close to single family homes, but you have there, you know, a cluster of multifamily there that might need it more. Or you go over to the Mid Beach area, you know, that area around St. Patrick's. Yeah, it's Mid Beach. It's generally surrounded by single family homes, but there you have, you know, a cluster of multifamily where you might need this more. So, you know, one thing is clear: unless people feel that their neighborhoods are clean, they won't feel like they want to walk out there. It won't feel as safe, as welcoming to our residents. And you know, you guys are proposing something great here. I'm backing it 100%. And I agree with Commissioner Magazine's approach of, you know, let's phase it in, and then we can augment based on the feedback we get from the area managers.
Yeah, so Brad, perhaps we make it a personal challenge to you to see how clean you can get our city for $500,000. Right? Especially if our workers are in tailored fitted clothing. I mean, think about how much harder, you know, they'll be working then.
50. Okay, if I can. So what I'm hearing here on the sanitation fund is if I bring the slide back up. So we have the additional funding for the waterway at $290,000, and the request from the commission is to add 1/2 of the 1.5. So we would be adding $750,000 for a residential area sidewalk pressure washing program, and we will go ahead and add that to the preliminary budget. And what I would just add to that is this was the proposed deficit for 2025 based on the 290. So now with adding the 750, that'll be you know, a $3.85 million structural deficit for 2025. And what this would end up is, this was originally based on our proposed one, which would be having $3.3 million left. That would leave us like 2.5, somewhere in that range left. So it would only leave us one more year of available balance. So then I just, again, encourage the commissioners, when the ordinance items the Commissioner Bott is championing on the roll-offs, both definition and fee rate, the recycling, and then when it comes to the major dollars, as you know, my team and budget are working very closely with Brad's team in sanitation as we move forward, engaging this consultant, and we bring back both, you know, the single family and both the multi-family waste haulers, that we look very strongly at those franchise fees, you know, and as I think as the commissioner said, we would like it to be like Disney World, but we can't do it on a Gatorland budget. So we're going to have to increase those rates to be commensurate with the level of service that our residents want. And you do have the backing of the resident survey. The residents have said that they do want this service. Just the challenge I have then to the commission is, when it comes time in 6 months or a year, when we're coming back with those contracts, you know, I'll be standing here next to Brad, supporting him and reminding everyone that you know, all of those wonderful services that we're implementing and have already been implemented, we now need to pay.
And you're going to have my support for that. This is going to come at a cost, right? And we're all recommending this. You know, I'm hoping we're all going to be sitting there in line with you saying, okay, our residents have seen this loud and clear. They love it, and there's a cost to it.
Okay. Okay, so sounds good. I think we have our marching orders when it comes to the sanitation fund. Thank you.
So the enhancements that we talked about previously were related to the general fund. We did want to show what we are recommending for other funds. So on the public safety and homeless enhancements, we are recommending a bicycle rapid response team for PD. There is a small bike team right now, but the request is to add some equipment so that if there's a riot or high impact event, we would be able to send more officers in the streets among the people. And this would be recommended from the confiscated fund, which is dedicated for PD's one-time items. The housing department asked for an ADA accessible passenger van to transport their clients. Right now they're using a regular van, and this is just would be an improvement to accommodate some of our clients. This would be coming from the Homeless Services Fund that the commission asked us to set aside $2 million from for one-time homeless items. And then the next two
And Tamika, I don't mean to interrupt, but do we have Alba here where maybe we can speak to how in demand that service is? If this is mission critical for this year, just give us some insight into that. Of course, important. How important and how much are we utilizing the need to have that ADA? It's not as if we don't have a van, but we're just adding that feature. How often would that aspect be utilized?
Good morning, Alba Tarre, Office of Housing and Community Services. Yes, we have seen an influx of individuals who are disabled and are in need of ADA accommodations. So right now we've been working with the City of Miami, who has been assisting to provide the transport as well as STS, but that takes some coordination time. So
Yep. Help me quantify that. Once an hour, once a day, once a week, once a month?
I would probably say maybe twice a month we see an individual that may need transport.
That's
Chair, if you don't mind.
please.
I think it's very important that this budget cycle we prioritize the needs of residents, and they should come first. So I would be against spending $110,000 on someone coming in for just twice a month.
Yeah, and it's not as if we can't do this, right? We're supportive of the service. We have the service just without right now the ADA accessibility. And given that we can liaise with the city, maybe it's a bit more complicated. My recommendation would be let's get a bit more useful life out of our existing passenger van. Let's continue that good coordination you're doing with your department, with the City of Miami. But for twice per month, I'm just not seeing the bang for the buck. Okay.
So if we have a consensus of that from the commission, we would be removing that item. Okay, so we'll be removing the 110,000 ADA accessible van, and that would remain that $2 million balance in the one-time homeless services
Mr.
account.
Chair?
Please.
So yesterday at the Public Safety and Neighborhood Quality of Life Committee meeting, we discussed the hours of operations of our daytime center for the Office of Housing and Community Services. We also discussed the line where our homeless line, and how I think 6 p.m. there is the latest time that it's answered. And one of the recommendations of the committee was, okay, we need to extend the hours of that time. And if there's a homeless person that needs placement, to be able to extend the hours of operation of our offices. I think right now the office closed around 3:30 or something like that. And so I think the committee had recommended extending both those hours. Could we perhaps, I don't know, that's something that we could discuss as part of this item? How we're gonna fund that, what's gonna be the costs involved. I see Alba is walking back to the
We almost save money.
If I can, from this fund was set aside, the $2 million was set aside originally for the homeless trust. And once that was transferred over, the commission gave direction by resolution that these dollars are for one-time, either capital or one-time program costs. It does sound like this might be a recurring, which would probably fall under the general fund, and we could add that to at the end, we have a list of debate, items up for debate for the general fund.
Okay, got it.
So this, I assume this is a recurring cost.
Yes.
So when we discussed yesterday the opportunity of having the phone assistance, we talked about the possibility of transferring the phone line after working hours to the non-emergency number, working alongside the public safety communications office, and from there they would dispatch to either police or to our specialized
So we're
outreach
able to
team.
do it with the existing resources we have. I don't think I love any words better than that we
Yes.
can use our
Being
existing
efficient.
resources. Yes.
And the extension of the office hours, because right now I think it closes around 3 or 3:30.
So that we wouldn't be able to accommodate. We
Right.
do have outreach that is available until 6 p.m. as well as specialized outreach that happens from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. But again, that is outreach. The physical walk-in center is available from Monday through Friday currently from 7:30 to 3:30 p.m.
To 3:30.
Correct.
So then, like, if someone's homeless and it's midnight or 10 o'clock at night and they realize, oh gosh, I don't have a place to sleep. You know, they're all dependent on someone approaching them and saying, hey, you want to go somewhere, but we don't have, our office isn't open. They can't go to our office to say, hey, listen, I want to get to Camilla's house because I don't want to sleep on the streets. We don't have that capability right now.
As of right now, the physical location at that time would be closed, but we would, right now, what we've been doing is our specialized outreach team would be dispatched, and from there,
Yeah, someone being
placement would take
dispatched,
place.
and from personal experience, sometimes, you know, given the limited resources and the amount of issues they're dealing with, it could take a little bit of time. I think the committee discussed extending those office hours, so perhaps, I think Jason said later in the presentation,
If
we'll
it's
have the opportunity
yeah,
to
recurring
discuss
general
that.
fund expenditure, we can talk
Okay.
about at the end. I think there's
Got
a
it.
number of items on
Thank
the
you,
table.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Pablo would just give us.
Thank you, Abba.
Okay. And we'll go back to the presentation.
All right, so the last two items are for equipment for PD. The first is criminal investigation equipment that is outdated, and that would be replaced using confiscated funds. And then the 3D mapping equipment is for their criminal investigations. Their software is going to get to end of life by the end of this fiscal year.
Tamika, one thing that was earlier in the presentation, they caught my eye, and it was a public safety and homeless enhancement, but I don't see it here in the other fund enhancements recommended, because I think it came out of the general fund, but I didn't want to skip over it. If I could have our new and well-deserved Chief Digna come up, I just wanted to talk about the full-time emergency management fire division chief position.
Okay.
And as you're coming up, again, congratulations. It is just across the board, such strong reception. I think I personally told you minimal need to meet going through the process because everybody that I had talked to
Thank you, Chair.
had gave the same glowing recommendation. So welcome here. Want to talk about this position. Tell me a little bit about it, and then I'm going to put a challenge to you. But I'm also going to have trust in you because you had unanimous support up here. You had unanimous support in the city. Even before you tell me what the position is, my challenge to you would say, can we find a way to use, just as we did for the homeless resources, use existing resources within the department? I understand the complexities of this, that somebody might be retiring and they're already wearing two hats. But as my first personal challenge to you on the new job, I would say, can we forgo this position, at least for this year, and see if we can essentially reallocate resources within to cover this? But let me turn it over to you. And if you tell me, Commissioner Magazine, you know what, this is just mission critical, we place our trust in you, and we'll continue doing so.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, lovely City Manager, and Miss Laura, Miss Bach. I'm going to see if my speech 101 can come in handy right now when I had to give my persuasive essays. So the emergency management is a function of the fire department in its sense that planning, allocation of resources, the mitigation process, alerting the community, and then the after effect of establishing us back to the normal function of the city without any hiccups. Became part of the fire department very long before I was here. At one point, it was reallocated as its own function with a public safety director in 2017. When that gentleman retired, our lovely Chief Mestas came on board, and he is our operations chief of the fire department and EMS division. That division is specifically for the daily operations of the firefighters and paramedics responding every single day on a 24-hour shift. He came on board with his FEMA, federal government knowledge of all his deployments from City of Miami, because he's on task force too, and he assumed the role. And our division has assumed a function that used to be operated by 33 people down to 4. And it's essential that we bifurcate this back to its allocated way in order to continue to function and mitigate and plan for everything. It's not just disaster, and I think that's what the misconception is. It's when a hurricane comes or a flood, but you're talking about 389 events that happen on a yearly basis here, that the fire department allocates an inspector to do. All of that requires an incident planning action form. Something happens, something goes down at the synagogue, anything like that, that requires a dedicated person that can just be dedicated just to mitigate those functions. Again, with the daily alerts, the water rise, all of that, that is an emergency function position. Right now, he's doing it too. And yeah, we're succeeding in it, but we're busting at the seams right now. And I think that we've ran out of extra T-shirts and uniforms or anything like that. We're already there. And it's prudent. It's not that we can't do it, but something's going to give. And I'd rather be proactive than a reactive chief at this point.
Got
And
it.
he's here that would be able to, Chief Mestas will be able to further explain, but.
Yeah. Appreciate it. I guess what I'll put back to you is, do you think you could accept it as a challenge to essentially understand the importance of the position, but to essentially use resources in other areas of the department? You know, if you need to allocate across divisions and then move some of those resources around. I'm just looking, you know, it's a high budget item, especially when we're going through some of these union contracts of $250,000. Could you use resources that you have anywhere within the department? I'll leave, you know, I don't want to get down to your operations. Could we essentially have this function kind of reassigned from within and helping save taxpayers, you know, $250,000? And
well, and again, that is a price tag if you're going to hire someone off the streets. Because we're a classified bargaining unit, every time you promote someone, you're promoting to that next rank. That person is already budgeted for. So the difference should be between the position that's getting promoted and that new rank and file that we're trying to assume, not just hire someone new from within, and then you trickle up. So that is the highest amount that would be if you're gonna hire someone from the outside to do that. And we are already doing all those functions from someone else. I had proposed that we have an anticipated date. He's gonna give me at least a year.
Yep.
So I am looking at least 7 months later.
So it sounds like challenge accepted-ish, that we can hire from within.
Yes.
And take down that $250,000.
Yeah.
What would we be talking, Madam City Manager? $30,000, $40,000 for a reclassification?
I'm not sure what the cost savings would be, but I do want to emphasize the importance of this role, given that Chief Mestas, as the deputy, is overseeing 4 divisions, and emergency management is the only one of those divisions that doesn't have a dedicated division chief. What we learned in the last rain and flood event is that we need more people focused on this in a dedicated fashion. And I think that, you know, I want to applaud Chief Abello in making this recommendation and bringing it forward, and I support her in this recommendation because I think this is part of succession planning and emergency management planning for the future.
And I appreciate that insight. Thank you, Madam Manager. And Chiefs, I appreciate that, but it seems as if we can kill two birds with one stone, where if we're hiring from within
Yes.
instead of out on the street,
Yeah.
this $250,000 could significantly come
Yes.
down. Maybe
Absolutely.
we could allocate $75,000, Mr. CFO, and we're saying, okay, that's not going to be the totality of that, but that'll be the incremental cost expenditure if we're hiring from within.
Well, if is to not add a head count, but to do a reclass of an existing sworn position, if that's the direction, and it seems like the chief, I guess, is okay with that, we would, we'll work with the budget office, and we will just incorporate that in the budget.
Would that be okay with my colleagues?
I would just want to ensure, doing more with less is always good, and if we can find somebody who is ready to take the next step up, that's great. I want to make sure, I mean, you know, these flood events and other weather events are not one-offs. They are our new normal, and we are learning that the hard way. We are spending I was going to say a naughty word, but I won't. An extremely large amount of money to improve our infrastructure, and I don't think we should be in the service of the laudable goal of being responsible for our dollars as a city and as an administration, because it's all of ours, it's our taxpayers. I don't want to inadvertently cut off our nose to spite our face. I think that's probably the wrong metaphor, but we need to make sure that we have the right person in place to get the job done, and that that person is, you know, moving forward with the succession planning as well, because we saw how seamlessly and beautifully it worked in your case, and we want to make sure that we've got the right people doing the right job when we need them, and so I want to make sure you have what you need. And whatever the right dollar amount, if it's $750,
Oh.
that's a well-paying job.
Well-
If it's $75,000, if it's $100,000, whatever it is, if it's less than $250, that's good.
There's something amazing about firefighters is that we're the jack of all trades. You know, I have firemen that are chicken catchers. So that's, you know, we are the jack of all trades. And I learned that early on in my career when I had to change a light bulb when someone called 911. So we are up for it, but we want to be efficient and successful in it as well.
Perfect. I love that. And I agree with Commissioner Bott. I'm not trying to force a square peg in a round hole, but it seems like we have consensus that maybe you were even leaning towards not bringing somebody new off the street.
I want to.
And, you know, this.
I'll be crucified. I'll be the shortest standing chief. Honest,
So this is great. You know, we're still going to deliver this role if we do so from within. If that doesn't happen, come back to us and then we can re-talk about that. But I think we could significantly take down the cost about this and just allocate what the incremental amount for a reclassification would be.
Chief, I would say your speech 101 class is paid off.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll go ahead and make that switch out in the general fund, which was additive, which is good news. So we'll go back to the presentation.
Okay, so now we're at transportation and mobility. The residential parking decal program that was recommended, pilot program was recommended by the commission. We are requesting to add $306,000. This is not for full-time positions. This would be 3 part-time positions to help us roll out this program. Residents will have to come into the city to get new decals, and we'll reassess the program next year in the budget process. The next item is for transportation department, and this would be funded from the transportation fund. The beach bicycle counter and some feedback signs are being recommended. Multimodal transport plans for major events. So there were a list of events that were requested. We are recommending funding some additional funding for Art Week, and we'd be adding some shuttle services, freebie, extended hours, and a water taxi component. And the last item is a full-time bike pedestrian coordinator position that was recommended by the City Commission to be added as a full-time versus a contracted position. For infrastructure enhancements, water and sewer are due a master plan update. The last one was done in 2019, and so we're recommending funding that update. That would be coming from the water and sewer utility funds. Convention Center also has its own fund, and they requested adding 1 plumber position. The Clean Miami Beach grant was recommended by the City Commission. IT has a request for a cybersecurity analyst, and this is just to be proactive in protecting our softwares and all our networks. The safety officer in HR was budgeted prior to COVID. That position was cut when we had to make reductions to our budget. The junior systems analyst position was requested by the planning department, and this is to help them with the ERP. And it would be an IT position, but funded from the planning, training, and tech funds. That's specifically for planning department expenditures. The full-time office associate position is being requested by finance department. There is a position that has been a temporary position for 7 years that helps with the water and sewer billing, and this would be paid for by the water, sewer, stormwater funds. And the last one is a full-time business intelligence engineer that currently is funded as a contracted position. IT has requested to convert that to a full-time position at a saving of $81,000. So
At a what?
at a savings of $81,000.
Savings.
So-
If everybody could take note, please. So,
yeah,
okay,
that's-
so parentheses are a good thing. They just, for everybody to take note out there that's watching.
And by getting a contract position and making it an internal position, which is the anomaly
Yeah,
there.
that's an
Yeah.
anomaly.
Yeah.
So this is the end of the operating budget. I know we were supposed to go back to make some decisions on recommendations.
But it might be advisable to go through the capital. It's not very long, and I think the
Please,
chair,
because
the chair wanted some context as the dollars, the surplus dollars are interchangeable from a capital and operating perspective. So I think we can go through that and then jump back.
And not just for that reason, but it's important that we look at this comprehensively, because we have a tremendous amount of outstanding capital needs. And like I said, we have a finite pie. We don't have a endless deficit that we can continue borrowing from. So if we take from one thing, or if we put in one thing, we're taking from another. And those could be things in the future that are very important. So if we could go through the capital, I think specifically, you're going to talk about some of the things that are unfunded.
Correct.
Correct. So this is a slide that we showed in the June FERC meeting. The request pretty much stayed the same, just tweaked. The unfunded number actually went down slightly. So we had 32 million of unfunded projects. And you'll see in the next couple of slides that we did
Sorry,
pick
could
up.
you just point us to the slide?
It's on page 83.
83, got it.
83, slide
We combined the two presentations to one to
Yeah.
make it seamless.
Ready? Okay, so that 31.8 was 32 million the last time you saw this presentation. We did pick up some additional funding, as Jason mentioned earlier in the presentation, when we got the July 1 values. So if you go to the next slide, it shows what we increased our revenues by, and then we also have the next slide that shows our recommendation. So because we did our recommended change in our dedicated millage for debt service, moving that up to CRR, we picked up 390,000. And then for the increase in our property values, we picked up $106,000 for the capital renewal and replacement fund, and just $33,000 for PAYGO fund, for a total of 529.
And then some of the recommended changes. So what here you see here is we had presented and was endorsed back in June by the commission our capital program. These are adjustments from that June recommendation and approval. First, the big dollar one would be at the June commission meeting. It was an item that went through FERC, was to add landscaping improvements to lot P63 in the amount of $765,000. That would be funded through the parking capital fund. So it is important to note this wouldn't be coming from our general fund dollars, would be coming from the GEO bond dollars specifically for trees. This would be able to be funded directly from the capital. And then these other four smaller CRR, or capital renewal and replacement projects, are the allocation of the dollars that we picked up through the adjustment in that millage rate.
Just when I got excited after we saved $80,000.
And then what we have here is the chair, FERC chair had requested at the last capital meeting was to come back And we only had a couple of kind of days to put this together. It was just kind of a high-level review of some of the projects that we are both aware of that have a specific funding gap, and then the next couple of slides will show undetermined needs. Ones that departments came back and said, you know, I know there's a project I'm working on, I have an allocation, I don't know how much more I will need, but I know I will need something. These specific ones are primarily our neighborhood improvement projects. So you're going to see these are the pricey capital projects that we know have funding gaps.
And Mr. CFO, could you just note which of these are likely to be the gap funded via the issuance of enterprise fund bonds?
Yes, an excellent point. So the North Beach Town Center, First Street, which has now been split into kind of two projects, the Phase 1, 2, and the Phase 3, 4, which is a little more longer term, and then the West Avenue Phase 3. We also have the 17th Street renovation, which is a bigger program. So when you see that gap, it's $290 million, let's say, just of these projects. And remember, we have like 800 capital projects in our 5-year capital program. These are some of the bigger dollar ones, again, that we know we had some gaps. The primary way we're going to fill that gap is through our enterprise funds. Most of these programs, these projects, these neighborhood improvement projects are to tackle, you know, water and sewer renovation needs and stormwater needs, and to tackle flooding. These projects are super important. And they are an ongoing multi-year program. Most of that gap will be funded towards that. So when there is, I believe there's already a standing item at FERC that we will be coming back in the fall. I know I mentioned it back when we got authorization on the $85 million intent to declare to issue bonds on the water sewer. And then when the critical needs program was approved on the stormwater, we said that we would be coming back in the fall to look at how to pay for the rest of that capital program. So there will be rate adjustment discussions in the fall on our water, sewer, and stormwater. And that is how we would fund those projects. If we do not want to adjust those rates come in the fall, then these projects would fall away and they would not be completed. But let's work through the basis that they will be done.
And if I could stop you there, and more so talking to my colleagues, when we become aware of some development projects in some of these areas, perhaps we can all collectively think, as we're discussing them, the possible public benefit that could be pro-offered if somebody's asking for variances or things like that is direct contribution to some of these unfunded projects that are in these areas. We all talk about, well, how can we keep allowing development when our water and sewer system is falling apart? Let's put our money where our mouth is. We're going to allow incremental development on the waterfront in Mid-Beach or North Beach. Well, let's put that directly into repairing our sewer system and our infrastructure in those areas, instead of just these intangible, okay, we'll pro-offer this. If there's going to be world-class projects in those areas, I think our current and future residents deserve world-class infrastructure there, or at a minimum, pipes that aren't made out of wood on Collins Avenue. So I think when we're entertaining some of these discussions and proposals, that's something that we should keep in the back of our mind, because we're not going to fund $1.2 billion by saving 80 grand, turning a contractor position into full-time. We need to really put some serious thought into how we're going to come up with some of these unfunded resources.
Thank you, Chair. So we can go back to show all the way at the right in the yellow there is the PAYGO funding. Some of that could theoretically come from some of the GEO bond dollars on the above ground. So with these neighborhood improvement projects are primarily renovating your water and sewer and your stormwater, which is the majority of the dollars. The restoration on the top, that's going to be your streetscape and your asphalt, your sidewalks and landscaping along those lines, would come from that PAYGO portion. So those dollars are smaller. They are manageable. This list particularly is a little less than $30 million. How do we fund those items are such as the surplus, which we started the day at 8.9 million, and I think we're down closer to 8.6 million based on some adds and subtracts we've had so far, and we're keeping tally just so we know when we get to that point again, is those dollars again for our union contracts and then any leftover is to go to our capital program. Our primary source of funding that PAYGO piece isn't necessarily the millage that comes in, which generates around $4 million a year. It's actually at the year-end surplus, and that's a very good policy that the prior commission put in place and has been the way we've moved forward. Last year, the general fund surplus was approximately $16 million, and all of that was put into PAYGO and our capital reserve funds. What we would do is we would do the same thing. If we were on track, I think we are, to probably be in that $14–16 million range, again, would be eating into these funding gaps as an example. And we'll get to where at the final slide, we'll really talk about where our recommendation, where those surplus funds will go. But I just wanted to just kind of complete this as I kind of hinted. This is just these next two slides are just a list of other projects that departments were just, because we just asked them, say, hey, what are you thinking? What's out there that you are aware of that you don't have enough dollars for? Now, some of these are ones that just aren't programmed yet. They've only been programmed for design, and they haven't programmed the construction side of it. So we will work with that to make sure that they get funded. They're not all PAYGO dollars. There are going to be water, there's going to be sewer, there's going to be stormwater, there's going to be transportation funds, GeoBond, all kinds of things in here. But again, the charge of the FERC chair was to just kind of come back and if we could just get some of this information. So again, we have a number of projects. There's a GeoBond project in there. The project hasn't gotten to the stage where we know that there's a gap, but we know there would be a gap. It's just an example. And then I want to turn it over to Tamika here to really end on the fire station update.
Right, so the direction from the FERC last month was to come back with a potential funded plan for fire stations gap. So when we worked with CIP post that meeting, they gave us an estimate of between $15 and $19 million for the gap. Between 7 and 9 would be the new construction if we do move to the new site, and then 8 to 10 million would be to move the stadium to a different location. First note is that we would treat this as one project, so we wouldn't have a separate project for the stadium being moved and a fire station. We just treat them as one complete project. And then secondly, we wouldn't need any funding for FY25, and that's because the project was previously fully funded. So there are dollars available to do whatever we need to do right now if this is going to move forward. And we would come back between 2026 and 2028 to ask for additional funding. So our recommendation in order to fund this significant gap is, as Jason mentioned, at the end of FY24, we do anticipate that we will have some general fund savings, primarily because of vacancies that we've had all year. And normally we would transfer those dollars based on city's policies to our capital reserve fund. Last year, we recommended splitting that between the capital reserve fund and the PAYGO fund. So at the end of this year, fiscal year, in November, we will take an item to commission and we will be recommending transferring all those savings, if commission approves, to the fire station to help fill that gap. And this may be, this may have to be done over a couple of years, but the idea is to just prioritize the fire station and to complete that gap sustainably.
And this just works under the assumption that the August vote goes one way, and then the commission gives that direction in September and then November. So we would work under the assumption that the top capital project priority is funding it. And I think that the charge that the commission gave is to come back with a path forward and how we have there. Does this mean that if this action in September is taken by the commission, it's now a dead project and it will never happen? We believe that there is a path forward to get this funded so that the construction dollars would be available when they would be needed as the project goes through its multi-year design process. So we just wanted to mention that again for perspective on the commission. And then I think last, we just want to, before we get into the debate and we jump back, is if we end up at a landing place for today, for the preliminary budget, which I feel that we're getting to that position, we would not have to have next Friday's third FERC budget workshop, which the city does traditionally end up canceling if it's needed, but sometimes needed, but I think we'll be good there. On July 24th at the commission meeting, there'll be a resolution to approve the maximum millage. So the only action the commission would be taking for now at the July 24th is just setting what the maximum combined millage is going to be, what all those different millage rates would be combined wise. because there are still chances to make adjustments, in September. By then, obviously, things will be pretty coalesced, will be pretty locked in, but there is still that adjustment. So just reminding everyone, we'll have our first public hearing on September 16th and our second public hearing on September 25th to finalize the millage and the budget. And I think that ends our presentation, and then we could go back to debate.
Jason?
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but I went through the budget and I had some items that I wanted to discuss with my colleagues. I don't know if we're going to have another meeting to do this, but I have some questions. For example, the ombudsman position, I think that was like 170,000. Last I recall, the sponsor pulled that item. I don't know if
Commissioner, just for that one, I don't think that one's being recommended. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair. That is an enhancement item, but that is not part of the preliminary budget at this time.
Okay, and then I remember seeing on a previous slide that there's a Camillus House Health Concern Initiative for like $100,000. That was recurring. Not really sure what that was about.
I could speak to that. I think in this year we did it as a one-time. We wanted to continue, and I'll let Alba jump in to give a little more detail, is to provide both the mental and medical health services for our homeless. And we started this year, I think, with a one-time transfer between vendors, and this is really to continue that program. And again, when we as the administration looked at what items we were recommending, with homeless being one of those top priorities, and we did have that ability to fund that, we did go ahead and fund all of the recommendations of the homeless.
And I'll recognize you. Where I land on this is we are a compassionate city. We've implemented new ordinances up here, but part of that is if we want to get people off of our streets, also providing resources to those that truly need it. And I think this is a way that we do that, but I'll turn it over to you.
And that program has been phenomenal alongside the Camilla's Lazarus program. We did in fact get Camilla's Health Concern because the Lazarus program for last fiscal year did not have the staffing to be able to provide that service. So we went with Camilla's Health Concern, who focused their efforts on medical outreach versus mental health and substance abuse. Obviously, with medical outreach, there is still a mental health component, but the focus is when they're engaging individuals.
Please over there, so let me finish, okay?
When they are engaging individuals, they are really focused on the medical aspect. So that really opens up engagement opportunities with people who may notoriously be service resistant for shelter.
Thank you, Alba. And Commissioner Suarez, was there another line item that you wanted to highlight as well, or was it those?
Yeah. And sorry for that. I'm babysitting the kids.
Could have been directed at me.
David, you've definitely talked to us in that same mean voice. We're used to it.
Okay, there's, I think a couple things, and I'm just going to list them through and then you can write them down, Jason, if you want. There was a loading dock for the police station for or garage doors for $400,000. I think that's pretty high. There's an Art Deco 30-gallon water heater replacement that was in the tune of a couple $100,000. I also wanted to say, there's a lot of city hall improvements. I don't know how the commission feels, maybe because we have a lot of initiatives this year. Maybe we could push most of the city hall improvements, I think, such as main entrance pavers, restroom renovations to 2026. Also, I'm a big fan of the waterways. The waterway markers and sign was, I think, 2 million plus. That's a lot. I don't know how many signs exactly there are. There's also a couple things, security enhancements citywide. It seemed pretty vague. I'm assuming those are cameras, and I think we all know, given the price, some cameras cost $20,000 each. there was a couple of things that were also not funded that I think we should consider, like the Loomis Park playground replacement. I take my children there. They certainly could use an upgrade. And the Loomis Park splash pad, I think would also be an amazing amenity. A lot of tourists that come to Miami Beach, that stay on Ocean Drive or on Collins, they all use the kids park there. And what a way to bring them back if they know we have world-class kids parks. And there's a couple of things with the garage elevator renewal. Those seem very high, tune of I think $300,000 or $400,000. The 7th Street garage, 16th Street garage, and Pennsylvania garage. And then one last thing, I know it's silly, but the Smith & Walensky 40-year certification. I know it's our building, and that's $150,000. Any way we can get Smith & Walensky to chip in for this recertification, since they are profiting off of it. So those are some of my my line item thoughts. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll hand it over to Mr. CFO, but I think the overwhelming majority of those were out of the capital budget that we discussed last meeting.
Yes, Chair. I think most of those items, we did take notes on a few that were, I think, related to this one, such as the garage door roll up, which I think was one requested by facilities, is being added to the capital program. I think a majority of those were ones that we went through at the capital budget meeting in June. But there are a couple that the commissioner mentioned, I think like the splash pad, which was a couple $1 million, I think, were ones that were not recommended for funding because we didn't have any funding. So unless there was an adjustment there or taking from the surplus, those would not be covered.
And my thought was we were just doing the operating here. So in advance of September, maybe if you wanted to have one-off conversations with the commissioner about some of those, kind of hone in a little bit, given that they were the capital and we're discussing operating, perhaps in the interim.
Yes, Chair.
I think that's the best path.
Yes, Chair.
So then that leaves us with essentially where we are pivoting versus what you've presented to us versus what we've essentially improvised on the fly up here.
If I can, Chair, to help facilitate a bit. So we started the day at an $8.9 million surplus, which again, we were hoping to have a good chunk of that.
Well, how naive of you.
For our union contracts. And then again, for whatever was remaining would definitely go to our capital program, but again, probably towards the First Street fire station. I believe that the group has already recommended going with the higher level on the area managers, adding not one but two detention officers at $344,000. That brings us down to 8.4, and then we got 200,000 back by changing out the fire position to just a reclass. So we're around $8.6 million as of right now. There are a number of items that were, and if I missed one, please correct me. I believe that there was a $20,000 to $30,000 Normandy Isle enhancement for programming. There was a Paycheck Protection Program study in the $60,000 to $75,000 range. There was an intensity density study for planning for $220,000. There was the Miami New Drama agreement, I think, is up for renewal and renegotiation. I know administration hasn't gone through that process yet to vet, but I think they've talked to the commission asking for $220,000 to increase. So it's I think going from 400 and something to 600 something to increase that by about 50%. And then we also have the $400,000 for the fitness festival, whether again we're funding it here or in the future. I think that's the list I have. No, there was $20,000 for the cats.
30,000 for the cats. They gave me a ballpark.
Oh, it's 30,000. Okay, and that would be from the sanitation fund, just as a side note.
And
what else am I missing?
an economic impact study on MXE.
And that was for how much?
That was 100,000.
I believe it was listed as not to exceed And I did confirm on the Paycheck Protection Program, it was item C7AY on June 26, not to exceed 75K. And just for clarification purposes, Miami New Drama is in the first year of a 3-year renewal. Their contract is up in 2026.
And Commissioner Fernandez, did you want to speak?
And I just want to make sure that we consider the one-time funding for the arts and culture organizations that are being affected by the state veto.
And I think if I may, I think Commissioner Bott I mentioned she has an item that's being referred to FERC to go into discussion about how the commission may want to approach that
So
subject.
But we need to consider this because it's going to be something that's we need to discuss as part of the 2025 budget. It's something that's going to be affecting
they're
this coming
totally
fiscal year.
separate items, but to your point, Commissioner Fernandez, it is working its way through the process, so if it's currently put in as not more than 1.4, I think the actual number is going to be less than $1 million. Should we put in a placeholder now of $1 million and?
Well, that would be up to the commission, but yes, if there's dollars that wanted to be allocated for 2025, today is the day to do that.
I think we need to send a message to the arts and cultural organizations that we are aware of the gravity of the situation and that this city commission is taking this seriously, and that we are looking at, putting a reserve on dollars, an allocation of dollars to one-time dollars to help fix this while we work with the state on an initiative for next year. And I think if you could look into the reserves in the resort tax, because that perhaps might be I think from my perspective, it might be an appropriate pool to be looking at for this. It seems like this is why we have a reserve.
And I think as a placeholder, you could put it up to, but not exceeding $1 million.
That's for direction from the commission.
For this year?
For this year.
For,
this coming
2025
fiscal year.
And is that inclusive of Miami New Drama?
No, this is I want to make sure that everyone understands this. These are two totally separate items.
Yeah.
So Miami New Drama, and Michelle Hausman is here, and he can talk about his concerns, is a totally separate item. This is a reaction to the state's cutting of all arts grants.
That's correct.
And we are not suggesting that we take the place of that. We are suggesting, my view is that it is to be focused solely on the possibility of losing jobs and economic impact. I'm not saying that we use the money, that we grant money to be used for an expansion of facilities or an extra set of performances or whatever. This is, we fund this person out of these dollars, and we don't want to have people lose their jobs because of what the governor did as an unintended consequence.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not going to attempt to read the tea leaves of Tallahassee, but just reading some of the verbiage, I'm optimistically hopeful, perhaps naively so, that this was kind of a shot across the bow for political purposes, and funding will be restored. We're going to find ourselves in a much different position if this has to be recurring.
It can't be
It's not
recurring.
intended to be.
It has to be a one-time funding. And from
Mr. Chair,
from my reading of this is that this was directed, there was an organization in more like in Central Florida, and this was sending a message, but it seems like this is really a one-time situation.
Well,
And from my perspective, this is just, from our end, this is a one-time situation.
Commissioner Suarez.
and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to stress the importance of building a really solid relationship with Tallahassee, especially with the State House, because they control the purse. And specifically, refilling Martha Gold's position for the intergov relations manager, because that's going to be key. And whoever we hire, we need to make sure that they have a great relationship with the House so that we can build a relationship for funding such as arts and other priorities that we might have. Cannot stress that enough.
I didn't think you were going to have a chance to fit that in, but that was impressive.
By any means.
Okay, so let's go through these. a lot of incremental expenses that we're adding that we didn't walk in here for. I think
A
where I'm.
number are one-time and there are a number of recurring. Obviously, I think they look at it for differently. And just not getting, again, back to the employees with the union contracts, a lot of things that we do negotiate, just to understand, have mid-year impacts. They may not be implemented until January 1st or July 1st or April 1st is a big date. So oftentimes you'll see a half number effectively for this year, but then the second year we have that. So we always, if there is going to be, items that are in the one-time area might be, work out better over a multi-year time frame to work within our union contracts.
And Mr. CFO, how does this work in terms of how we're voting on which items are being added and which are not?
For the three members that are here, we'll look for, I guess, a 2 to 3 consensus
So
on
I'll
whether we're
put my
adding
cards on the table without going through line item by line item. I'll support everybody's initiatives that are tangible. So the CATS, the new drama, Normandy Fountain, the fitness, and I'll personally not vote in favor of any of the studies. But that leaves it to you two. It's democracy. That's just where I'm at. So I'll.
Which were the two studies? I know I had one.
There were three, if I can. There's 75,000 for the Paycheck Protection Program, 75,000 for an economic analysis at ACDC, and the 220,000 for an intensity density planning study.
I think that the economic analysis of the MXC is very important. We need to understand, the return on investments that we're making there. And again, not to repeat everything I mentioned earlier, we're looking at policies having to do with the development of housing on Washington Avenue. We're going to be looking at the development of housing on Lincoln Road, and we need to understand what is our capacity in the city. What does our zoning currently allow? How much of that has been used? What is currently available before we adopt policies that could potentially over-intensify or under-intensify, under-provide for commercial uses or under-provide for housing. That's what this study does. So I think at least these two studies are essential as we're crafting policies for the future, for the city we want to be in the future.
So,
And if I can just throw my 2 cents in, I would be supportive of the MXE study as well. I think, there's a lot of discussion of making at least Washington Avenue very residential.
Yep.
And I think that's important. It's an important data point to have when we're trying to figure out what's the best approach for that area. Thank you.
So I agree with my colleagues. I will say that the Paycheck Protection Possibility Study was born of, again, this notion of how do we protect the people that make our hospitality industry hum, the residents among us who pay their taxes, who send their kids to school, who are the backbone of our hospitality industry in the event that should there be a curfew, because they're the ones who can least support that. However, we just approved a $100,000 kitty for people to make a request for funding for the tough months of August and September in a city that has been built on a barrier island, where we know that August and September are crappy weather because it's really hot and there might be hurricanes and tourism slows down. So I would be willing to give up the study, but if we are contemplating a curfew, we find ourselves in the next few years contemplating a curfew, I would ask for the same open-minded approach to maybe doing a one-time kitty for people who can demonstrate that they couldn't make their rent payment for the month of March because they lost their 2 best tipping weekends of the year, or whatever it may be. I would be willing to give on that now to fund the other things that we've discussed.
Have direction.
The item that was being, of all the items I mentioned,
So
the
I
item that was
think
the item
basically we'll
being
move
removed
forward with the
was-
ones that you've listed out, withdrawing the paycheck protection.
Okay, so if I can, just for the record, because it would be, this would be recurring expense, 220,000 set aside. And again, I know that Miami New Drama is already in the first year, but I guess this is a reopener on their contract. But so with $220,000 set aside on that, that would be recurring expense. The Normandy Isle programming, that's 30,000. And if I remember, Commissioner Bott had said that that was contingent on there being a match from the organization. So that would be 30,000 budgeted, and then that would be contingent on a match. So those two are recurring. That would be $250,000 out of the general fund on a recurring basis. We would have 75,000 set aside for an the MXC economic analysis. That's a one-time. 220,000 for the intensity density study as a one-time. The CATS, $30,000 CATS initiative would be at one time out of the sanitation fund. $400,000 for the fitness fund, that would, for the fitness festival, that'd be a one-time expenditure. And then,
I'm sorry, Mr. CFO, did we not say that we were going to do that in 2026? Because we were actually going to, I'm sorry, next year's budget item, because we're not going to have an activation in 2025. So we'll actually have that $400,000 of funding in next year. We'll talk about it in next year's budget cycle, because we would look to possibly take advantage of possible sponsorship opportunities for 2026.
there was a mention of it, but it was on the table to be debated, so.
Yeah, so that's where I would move in that. I want to be sure that my colleague knows I'm fully supportive of the moving forward with the program, but in terms of that $400,000, I think we use the next year to look for sponsorships, and if not, we make that a mission critical priority for next year's budget cycle.
Is that that's a fitness festival?
Yes.
Okay, that's a strong recommendation.
Okay, so the fitness so the funding structure, and this is for some of the team in the back, the funding structure on that 1.4 million will be of the $606,000 annual allocation on the pool. 500 will be set aside in 25, 500 will be set aside in 26, and then the $400,000 we will find in the 26 budget.
Yeah,
So we'll
yes,
take-
and I'm hoping some of these public safety ones, such as the high visibility for Israel, and also the enhanced days during spring break, I'm hoping some of those expenses actually fall off and then can be reallocated.
Thank you, Chair. That is hopefully the intention, that there's be one more year of this, the high level of that. And then the final thing, I think, and Tamika will jump in if I've missed anything for direction, is we are going to put in the resort tax, utilizing resort tax reserves, a one-time set-aside allocation for $1 million to support our arts and cultural program, which we will deal with, I guess, down the line. This is just a budget allocation. This is a budget appropriations set aside, and then the actual utilization, or whether we utilize it, we determine through future
Commission
resolutions.
actions. We could
Exactly.
we could do through or we could always do a mid-year budget, or, yeah.
But we won't need to, because we're
We
going to
won't need
actually,
to, because
we'll
we're-
actually have appropriated, and then a resolution would determine, I guess, who gets what, if we move forward
And
on that.
perhaps we could, work on the resolutions together if it's needed.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Yeah, I think that summarizes everything, and if,
Do we need to do anything about the fire station allocation recommendation?
no, not at this time. I think at this time, the pool is getting smaller, that we have, I believe, do we have a number on the total?
8.2.
It's one current, recurring, and,
It's a combination of both.
correct. Okay, so we're down to around 8.2 million. So
Yeah,
we will
no
use,
pressure, I'm just saying, on the union negotiations, you can make up that. Chief, where's Chief Jones?
And do we have Miami New Drama here?
Yes.
Yes, and we've made everybody else fight dollar for dollar, so welcome, come introduce yourself and tell me why $150,000 doesn't work, you need 225.
their allocation, I think, is like 400 and something, and this would bring it up to 600 and something, it's in that range.
First of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. I feel the luckiest artistic director because I am the artistic director of an anchor of Miami Beach. We've received extraordinary support. This has been a lovely, wonderful marriage. We are the first theater company in the state of Florida to send a show to Broadway. And we are just an 8-year-old company. This would not have happened without the support of Miami Beach. So I'm extremely grateful, and Raquel, you and I wrestled and, but I am, listen, the reason I'm here today is because, and I'm also very grateful to Lisette, who's worked so hard, and I'm sorry for the short notice, but as the budget is being done, we've had a management agreement that it's now, it started in 2016, and we've received since 2018 $420,000 from the city of Miami Beach plus reimbursements, and reimbursement for air conditioning, electricity, et cetera. And that has not changed since 2018. Meanwhile, Miami New Drama's budget expanded dramatically. We receive a lot of support from a lot of the community. For example, this year we have $400,000 from the Knight Foundation. The county gives us $250,000. And we are now, our budget is $5.5 million. So the $420,000, which was the cost to manage the Colony Theater back in 2018, after inflation, especially after the pandemic, has really significantly impacted us. We're now looking at next year having to cut some shows. I also will say that for the last 3 years, we have been bleeding the month of March. March used to be a good month for us, but since all the madness of spring break, for 2 years we have shows that brought almost no income. Then last year we decided wisely to not do a show in March. But the point is
So to stop you there, and I want you to continue, but I'd like you to come to us in October, November, because this March was very different, right? We had residents going out of their houses, going to restaurants. We didn't have the influx of visitors, but we had residents for the first time that were saying, you know what, this is fantastic. So we should really look to partner and help support you in a way where we can have that as residents visit Miami New Drama Week. Residents are no longer afraid to leave their homes in March, and now we need to provide them this activation. What better way than a world-class talent on Lincoln Road?
That would be amazing, Commissioner. I really appreciate it. Now, we are asking an increase from $420,000, which was 2018 numbers, to $620,000, which we've created. We've commissioned an economic impact study because I know we're talking about taxpayers' money, and that is sacred. So it is extremely important for us to show that we are a good investment. We are a good ROI. We impact $10 million at the GDP of the city, especially on Lincoln Road, which Lincoln Road has to compete now with a lot of other neighborhoods, and we are an anchor for Lincoln Road. We are the last remaining cultural anchor. Of course, there's a wonderful older brother of ours, New World Symphony, that it's a block away, but nonetheless, there used to be a lot more arts, and now that Ulights is leaving, we are the last remaining art organizations in Lincoln Road.
And back to 150 grand work? Does it have to be 225? Make the argument why 220.
If I can, I believe Commissioner Bott was wise, and if it was the request this to be a set aside so that the administration can then negotiate an amended agreement.
Okay.
So if we'll set that aside, because Tamika was pointing that out to me, as we'll have it as a set aside, not as a direct allocation, and then that'll be subject to obviously discussions with the administration and then an amended agreement coming back to the commission, but we will have that set aside.
And if I might ask a question, Michelle, can you, how, compared to some of the other cultural anchors in the city, how much do you get versus New World Symphony or?
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers of the other organization, but I can say that historically, the city of Miami Beach has invested heavily on them. You know, New World Symphony received $100 million for their building and the land, and I will say, it's the smartest investment possible that the city of Miami Beach has made. I just want to say that not as a comparison, but that's as wise. Like, look how amazing that organization became. It's a world-renowned organization. We have done quite a bit. We took a show to Broadway with pennies on the investment of the city, which obviously has gone a long way, but comparably to what we've spent with Miami City Ballet, et cetera, we've been cheap.
So, Chair, we'll just to wrap up for this particular item, we will have that as a set aside, and TCD will negotiate out an amended agreement and bring that back to Commission for a vote.
If I may add, so there's certain requirements in the existing management agreement, certain services that are provided, and so we would want to look at a cost-benefit analysis of additional funding for this management agreement and what that means in terms of the output and resident benefits and all of the things that come with it. As I know, other organizations may also be interested in augmented funding. We just want to make sure that we negotiate this appropriately.
Of course, and
Mr. Chair, if just have, and Jason, through the chair, I have a quick question. Do these cultural institutions, do they provide an analysis of their finances also, or at least the portion that we contribute?
Yes, I believe every single grant agreement we have with all of these institutions, whether they're nonprofits providing a senior program or something for children or an arts program, they all have very specific grant agreements that have scopes of services and deliverables.
I think the question was raised, and I don't believe it was answered. Like, why specifically $225,000? Is this, are we covering a gap in salaries? Are we hiring another position? You can speak to that, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Commissioner Suarez. And I know how important it is. And by the way, this is the reason why we created this economic impact study, because I know how careful you are about the sanctity of taxpayers' money. If Nick Richburg is on the line, I think he's waiting on the line. He is the managing director. He could give more specific details about the economic. But I will say, in general term, that that in the last 6 years, the cultural world has been, as the rest of the world, impacted by inflation. And this is at least to try to get us up to the level we were before. By the way, the city used to be 20%, 25% of our budget, and now it's less than 10%. Even with this request, it'll be about 10%.
So why don't we recognize Nick, if we can, real quick.
Nick, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Commissioners. Yes, I think Michelle answered the question nicely. Labor costs and cost of operations are up 35% and 40% respectively in the past 5 years. So obviously there's cost of investment that has gone up. We've continued to invest more and more dollars to have increased activation in the space year after year to meet our pre-agreed upon benchmarks with the city. As Michelle said, the city investment has stayed flat over those past 6 years. It's simply not a sustainable model for us. This makes it more right-sized back to the original intent of how Michelle referenced percentages of our overall investment in the activation, still less than originally contemplated, but brings it to a level that at least for us is sustainable, does not require trimming of activity, and allows us to continue to grow the operations and create the impact that, if you haven't had a chance yet to look at the study, it's detailed and robust, and I look forward to discussing it with you in detail. But I think we make an excellent case, and it was important for us to make it about how we can quantify the impact that we know anecdotally we're having on local businesses and on the city as a whole as a destination anchor on Lincoln Road.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so right now, all that we're doing is we're doing a set aside. We're not committing ourselves.
Right.
We're allowing there to be a conversation, a negotiation. I'm going to put this on the record. In the future, I love Miami New Drama. I think, Michelle, the work you do is incredible. And Nick, his dedication is great. I need to hear from you guys sooner, please. I only, got a text message yesterday, and, I was disconnected from the world for my birthday yesterday. But, so I love to be able to support the organizations. I'm just going to put this on the record as well. I want us to be very mindful about the precedent that we set to one of our children. I feel like these are all of our children, and we all support them. They contribute to the beautiful fabric of Miami Beach. We have so many organizations like Miami New Drama that are facing this same challenge. And what we do for one, we are gonna probably end up getting the request from all. And so we have to be very mindful about the fairness and the precedents that we establish when we do this. So
we can appreciate that, Commissioner, and thank you and heard. And not everyone on this day is as equally familiar as you are with the work Miami New Drama does, or the history of the facility and the transformation that it's undergone over the past 7 years through our management. And And we're extremely mindful of that responsibility as stewards of the facility and the importance of directing the public funds in a thoughtful way. It was very important for us to be able to make a compelling and factually accurate, data-driven argument. Businesses like ours are not easy to economically model. It certainly took us longer than we had expected, but it was important to get it right. And
But we
we
also
think we
have,
did.
like,
So we
for
look forward to
example,
continuing the discussion.
Yeah.
But for example, you know, we have MDPL, you know, we have Unidad, we have the band shell, we have a number of entities that, you know, manage spaces on behalf of the city, that, you know, manage spaces, deal with infrastructure issues, and deal with improvements to facilities in addition to programming. They're also dealing with it. So anyways, my point is, happy to support the set aside. Happy to support a conversation, because we're not tying our hands. We're just saying, you know, we're putting this aside and we'll take action at a later date once we understand the numbers better. Please reach out to my office so we can set up a time, because I want to be able to get properly briefed on it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, and I would like to invite you November 11th, Studio 54 on Broadway, the first Miami Beach show ever making it, the first Florida show ever making it to Broadway. So if you make it to New York, tickets are on me. Thank you so much.
If you've seen our CFO in action, I think it would have been easier to negotiating with us, but it's in your hands now.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I think this will wrap up our preliminary budget. We will be, I think at this point, based on the information we have, we will go ahead and cancel the next Friday FERC, and then we will see us again on June 24th to set that millage. And just wanted to thank the Commission. July, thank you.
And if I just want to, Mr. Chair, thank you for guiding this process. You are a new member of the City Commission, but the mayor trusted you to be the chair of the Finance Committee, and you're doing such a great job in guiding this process, not only helping us with the initiatives we put forward, but making sure that we're being mindful of the taxpayers' dollars, thinking about the future projects and the future needs and the capital needs of the city going into the future. So I just, you know, want to thank you for how diligent you are leading this process in a very respectful way to the taxpayers.
It means a lot, but team effort. You know, everything that we've done over these past 7 months really has been great team effort, whether that be our electeds, our city staff, our fabulous employees, and our residents. So look forward to continuing. Thank you all for everybody's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.